One moment. April 26th board meeting. Can I ask that everyone please join me in standing if able? I would like to begin by acknowledging that this meeting is situated upon traditional territories. Nous reconnaissons que nous sommes accueillis sur les terres des Mississauga, des Anishinaabe, de la Confédération Haudenosaunee et du Wendat. Nous voulons également reconnaître la pérennité de la présence des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits. Next, we will move on to O Canada. Thank you very much. Tonight we have the honor and privilege of celebrating multiple heritage months. And I will turn it over first to Trustees Arts and Vice Chair Shan, who will speak about Sikh Heritage Month.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since 2016, the TDSB has proudly recognized Sikh Heritage Month throughout the month of April. This month-long celebration of Sikh arts, culture, and heritage was first enshrined in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 2013, and then nationally across Canada in 2019. Celebrating Sikh Heritage Month here at the TDSB is an opportunity for our staff and students to learn more about Sikh culture, traditions, and history by providing many contributions of Sikh Canadians in our province and in the country. Sikh Canadians have lived in Ontario since the turn of the 20th century. They have made significant contributions to the growth and prosperity of our province, and their traditions and culture continue to be a vibrant part of every aspect of life of Torontonians and Canadians alike. Sharing in and celebrating Sikh Heritage Month helps raise up our Sikh students and staff, and it also helps encourage conversations and builds new knowledge, understanding, and respect for each other in our schools and communities. This year's theme for Sikh Heritage Month is Case. Case is one of the 5 kakars, which are Case, Kirpan, Kara, Karga, and Kakera. These kakars are sacred articles prescribed by Guru Gobind Singh Ji that Sikh individuals must acknowledge as part of their faith. Throughout April, Sikh Heritage Month celebrations have been filled with educational, informative, and fun opportunities for staff, students, and the TDSB community to further learn about Sikhism. For example, the upcoming Vaisakhi, also known as Khalsa Day, celebrates the Sikh New Year across Ontario. This year, Khalsa Day will be celebrated on Sunday, April 30th, with a parade in downtown Toronto from Exhibition Place to Nathan Phillips Square. This celebration is the 3rd largest parade in Canada, and I encourage all of you to attend and participate in the celebration. And I will pass it to my colleague, Trustee Shen.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Wahi Guruji ka Khalsa, Wahi Guruji ki Fateh, Sat Sri Akal. Greetings, everyone. I'm delighted to be bringing remarks for Sikh Heritage Month today. About 7 years ago, I was fortunate to be in this room to pass the motion to recognize Sikh Heritage Month and be back to bring greetings and see the growth of this Heritage Month committee, and the work is phenomenal. So the volunteers with the Sikh Heritage Month committee have been working really hard and organizing many activities and events and classroom content throughout this significant month. To showcase the theme, TDSB held a poster and a video contest. The winning poster was created by Yuvraj, a grade 4 student from Graysdale Public School, and the winning video was done by Baranjit, a grade 12 student from Thistletown Collegiate Institute. Our celebration also included a virtual celebration with student performances and keynote speakers, including Gurdeep Pandar, a Yukon-based Bhangra dance artist, and it continued with other events, including author Navjot Kaur, as well as performances by our students. We were thrilled to host an informative panelist discussion with 2 well-accomplished individuals as part of a speaker series. Rajvinder Grawal, a Toronto area digital content creator and a CityLine style expert, as well as Gurdeep Alwalia, a marketing consultant and stylist, and a co-founder of 18 Layers, were part of those keynote speaker series. Lastly, I would like to encourage all of you to listen to the 3-part podcast series, if you haven't done so already, that was launched with the support of the staff, students, and the TDSP community, discussing 3 important things that are crucial to the Sikh community as values. Seva, which is a selfless service. Oneness, which is for equity and justice for all. And Chaddi Kala, eternal resilience and optimism and joy. And these podcasts are amazing. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. As Sikh Heritage Month comes to a close, all students, staff, and community members are invited to attend the TDSP Sikh Heritage Month wrap-up virtual celebration happening tomorrow, Thursday in the morning from 9:30 to 10:30. Again, Thursday, April 27, 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Finally, I would like to thank all the volunteers of the committee, all of the people who have worked hard, including our executive officer, Mr. Peter Singh, as well, leading the team, for all the work that was done in enriching the learning that we have at TDSB about Sikh heritage, histories, and current context for all of the staff and the students. You're truly making a difference in our schools and communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Shen. During the month of April, we also recognize Hispanic Heritage Month. There has been no Hispanic Heritage Month Volunteer Committee this year, therefore no activities to report on. At this time, I would ask Trustee D. DeVitis to provide remarks about Latin American History Month, which is also recognized at the TDSB during the month of April.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and it's my honor to speak about Latin American History Month on behalf of the TDSB. As the first trustee of Latin American Heritage to sit on the board since 1997. Buenas noches a todos, en especial a mi gente, los voluntarios, los estudiantes, los educadores que ayudaron a organizar el día y el mes y las actividades que hemos tenido para celebrar nuestra cultura. This heritage includes people from more than 21 different countries and represents over 500 different languages spoken in our communities, including Indigenous and African languages such as Kuna, Agarifuna. Across the board, our schools are home to more than 5,000 Latin American students. In the late 1970s, Latin American immigrants began arriving in Toronto. Specifically, many settled in the Kensington Market area, which has long been a neighborhood for newcomers in Toronto. Just like today, immigrants were drawn to Canada because it offered better economic opportunities and political representation than the native countries. In a decade, our country's Latin American community quickly grew from 3,000 to more than 68,000. Today, Latin American Canadians continue to make major contributions to politics, culture, sport, and business, and are known for having developed St. Clair as the vibrant Latin American hub for organization and activities. More than 80,000 people of Latin American heritage live in Toronto alone. Through school and community initiatives, events, and resources, our students and staff have been exploring the theme of decolonizing Latin American History Month and beyond, honoring and uplifting the real histories and multiplicities of our identities. This includes both pre-colonial, present-day realities due to colonization. Thank you to staff, trustees, students, and community members who continue to educate our school communities about Latin America. Since its creation, the Latin American History Month Volunteer Planning Committee has worked hard to reflect and represent all intersectional differences within our communities of Latin America, Abiyala, Pachamama, and its diaspora. We fundamentally recognize that our communities are not monolithic across all intersectional identity markers. Throughout the month of April, we are thrilled to host several activities planned for students, staff, and community members, including a virtual author reading workshops and more. Every year, the Latin American History Month Committee hosts a video and poster contest for students from K-12 to participate in. This year's video winner is Mariana, a grade 11 student who performs the song Llorando Se Fue in 3 languages. The video is on our webpage for those of you who want to be serenaded. The winners of the poster contest from grade K to 2 are Iker from Rosethorn Junior School and Jesse Ketchum. For grade 3 to 6, the winner is grade 4 student Olivia from Rosethorn Junior School. And from grade 7 to 12, the winner is grade 11 student Mariana from AY Jackson. Big congratulations to all winners, and thank you to all who collaborated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee DeVitis, for that really fulsome and wonderful report on all the activities this month. So before we move on, I just would note that I was remiss and I did not ask for an approval of the agenda earlier. So at this point, if I could just ask for a mover and a seconder of the agenda for this evening. Thank you, Trustee Williams and Trustee Hassan. All those in favor, we'll do it by show of hands. Thank you. And any opposed? No. I'm just going to check to see if we're okay in terms of technical issues. Okay, I've been informed the video. Oh, okay. I didn't realize we have some videos. Wonderful. So we're just going to queue up some videos regarding the Heritage Months that we had. So we're off and ready to go.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Biranjit Singh, and today I'll be talking about case. Case in Sikhi is a custom of letting one's hair grow naturally or remain uncut. It is the natural gift given by our gurus. Case and the other 4 kakars of Ganga, Kashara, Kirpan, and Kara were introduced by Guru Gobind Singh Ji in the year of 1699 for us Sikhs to have an identity. With that being said, I want to talk about the Sikhs who sacrificed their life to not violate the 5 kakars. I could name by Sati Das Ji and by Mati Das Ji. However, in this video, I want to talk about Bhai Taru Singh Ji. Bhai Taru Singh Ji was a Sikh who was ordered by the Mughals to cut his hair. However, he refused to, and the barbers that were responsible to cut his hair also refused to cut his hair just because they knew how Sikhs were so powerful. At the end of the day, the Mughals were forced to take Bhai Taru Singh Ji's skull. Take into consideration that taking someone's scalp is way more painful than just cutting someone's hair. This is a prime example how Tan Tan by Tao Singh Ji kept his promise to his Guruji and did not violate any of the five kakars. The gaze is a natural crown gifted by our gurus. A person with a gaze can be identified if he or she is a Sikh. Well, I'll take your guys' leave. If you have any questions about gaze, please feel free to contact me. And if I made any mistakes throughout this video, please forgive me in advance. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Llorando se fue la que un día me hizo llorar. Llorando se fue la que un día me hizo llorar. Llorando estará recordando el amor que un día no supo cuidar. Llorando estará recordando el amor que un día no supo cuidar. Onde for, a coração vai estar pra sempre onde for. Dança, sol e mágoa de arena ao lar, o amor faz perder encontrar. Lamando estarei no embarque este amor, por dia, instante fuirei. Guajarei wakuja pala kunjak na kedashka. Wagarajas tuja pala kunjak na kedashka. Wajarajangano gata japarku kujus kata tempo il gachinchu. Wajarajangano gata japarku kujus kata tempo il gachinchu. No gata japarku kujus kata tempo il gachinchu. Pai manja pargaso gacha chimpichu suchanchu. Wajara kangano gata japarkur kuyush kata polar ganchanchu. Wajara jangano gata japarkur kuyush kata polar ganchu.
At this point in time, I would like to pass the microphone over to Trustee McLean, who will introduce. We have another video? No. Who will be introducing the memorials section this evening.
Thank you, and through the chair. I rise today to share the sad and tragic news of the sudden passing of Gabriel Magalhaes on March 25th. Gabriel was a 16-year-old grade 11 student of Etobicoke Collegiate. He enjoyed snowboarding and was a very dedicated student. Among Gabriel's favorite subjects were math, science, and Spanish. He was very focused on attending university and a career in astrophysics. Trustee King and I would like to thank the TDSB teams that went to Humberside Collegiate, Keele Street Public School, and Etobicoke Collegiate to support students and staff. The Keele Street Public School community organized a candlelight walk to honor Gabriel and his family. Hundreds of family, friends, and Torontonians came to pay tribute. I personally felt Mom Andrea showed tremendous strength, grace, and compassion in the face of this unthinkable tragedy when she pleaded for there to be proper supports in place to address mental health challenges and social service needs. Gabriel will be missed. Gabriel will be remembered. On behalf of Chair Chernos Lynn, I ask that we now please rise for a moment of silence to honor Gabriel and the other valued employees we've lost too soon.
Thank you, Trustee McLean, for those reflective and very thoughtful words. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the April regular board meeting. As you know, every spring, the Ministry of Education announces revisions to education funding. We know these as the Grants for Student Needs, or the GSNs. And within those announcements come detailed information regarding the amounts that school boards will receive for the upcoming year. As you know, the main funding for education is calculated through enrollment at a per pupil rate and a set of provincial benchmark costs for the major components of operational costs. As trustees, the Education Act lays out one of the primary responsibilities of our official role: to collaborate with TDSB staff to present a balanced budget. As such, it is our job to pass a balanced budget that best supports the needs and well-being of our students while honoring our commitment to equity and student achievement with the funding that we are provided with. This process begins in the fall and aims to be concluded in June. The process is challenging, and it involves collaboration with staff, trustees, families, and our wider communities to ensure that we harness everyone's best thinking. As all of us in the boardroom here know, and those watching online are hopefully aware, trustees are strongly advocating for more stable government funding that supports all pandemic recovery costs and plans. Not only that, it is crucial that the ministry funds statutory benefits in their entirety. It is important that the ministry recognizes the challenges we have faced and continue to face in the course of the pandemic and into the future, and how these aspects impact our budget, our operations, and our bottom line as a school board. And I can tell you that as recently as today, during the minister's bi-weekly calls with chairs, I was granted a question and did ask specifically about the statutory benefits and that gap in funding. I won't say that I got the most reassuring of responses, but it is being raised repeatedly, and that's important. And I think other boards are also starting to really echo that call. On our agenda tonight, and I would just add that we must continue to do everything in our power to best support student learning and achievement, mental health and well-being within our schools. So on our agenda tonight, staff will provide an update on the budget process, and of course, a discussion will be had as to how we are moving forward with the information and numbers we have been provided with thus far. As you are all aware, the ministry has unfortunately reconfirmed that COVID-19 funding will not continue. They have also chosen not to fully fund statutory benefits, items that are completely beyond the control of school boards and ought to be direct transfer payments from the provincial government. To ask boards to pull dollars meant for programs and supports for students and to use those to fund benefits is to do a disservice to those we serve. As our advocacy continues, I am hopeful the government will understand and rectify the predicament they have unfortunately placed us in. I want to sincerely thank everyone who has played a part and continues to play in preparing the budget for the 2023-24 school year. This is stressful, grueling work, and the efforts and determination to do the very best you can under difficult circumstances are both valued and appreciated. And I want to make sure that we know this is very much appreciated to our staff. So thank you. As part of our advocacy, trustees requested our staff survey parents on their opinions about the impact of the pandemic on their children. What we called the Pandemic Impacts Budget Survey was completed by nearly 18,000 parents, guardians, and caregivers in a short number of days. The survey provided us with significant results that I would like to briefly highlight for everyone this evening. Here's what we learned. 69% of TDSB parents, guardians, and caregivers believe the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are still being felt by their children. 86% believe that the provincial learning recovery funding provided by the Ministry of Education for the past 2 years for additional staff to support students should be continued. And 90% of parents, guardians, and caregivers believes that the ministry should fully fund or partially cover the $70 million that the TDSB spent on pandemic-related costs. In response to these findings, trustees have been writing to our elected officials and the Minister of Education to ask for their support of our board's request that the province continue providing the students of Ontario with the support they need after the following 3 years of disruption due to COVID-19. Our advocacy on these items, both on our own and together with OBSPA, the Ontario Public School Boards Association, on these items must continue. This evening, I would also like to update everyone on a few items that we have talked about, or that I have talked about in past month reports. So in response to our motion from February 1st, 2023 on a national food program, I want to bring to your attention an update pertaining to an advocacy letter that I shared with provincial and federal politicians regarding an urgent need to address food insecurity and for their support in the creation of a national food program. We recently received a response from the Federal Ministry of Families, Children, and Social Development, where we were informed that in their view, school meal programs on their own are not a solution to financial hardship or food insecurity. The commitment to develop a national food policy is part of a comprehensive approach, including tax benefits, social programs, and the creation of childcare subsidies. The response was probably not exactly what trustees were hoping for, and while I do understand the overall approach of the government, I think it is imperative that we continue, together with OBSPA, to advocate on behalf of our students for a national food program to ensure all children have access to healthy, nutritious food. On combating violence and improving school safety, something we have talked about in this room quite a bit in the last few months, I am pleased to inform you that in response to our advocacy from last year and this fall about the growing incidence of violence among young people in and around our schools as well as in their communities, the provincial government is providing the TDSB with an additional $1.8 million. This additional funding will be used to support inclusion and engagement in our schools. It will enable the board to pursue new educational partnerships, expand youth employment opportunities for students across the district, and will alleviate the concerns of TDSB students and families by helping to reduce the risk of violence in our schools. Our students should feel safe, protected, and supported in our buildings. We must continue to ensure our schools are safe and inclusive spaces for all. And finally, to the election of student trustees. I would like to remind everyone that this week is TDSB Student Election Week. Starting this past Monday, April 24th, student candidates and their campaign videos went live on our public-facing website, tdsb.on.ca. I encourage all our students in grades 7 to 11 to view the candidates campaigning for the various eligible positions so that they can make sure that when they are making decisions about who to vote for, that they are informed about their student representatives. Student trustees, it goes without saying, play an important role here at the Toronto District School Board, as they represent the voice of our students from across the system and advocate on their behalf. So share your voice and shape your future at your school board. Voting will once again take place online this Friday, April 28th. And since I'm talking about student trustees, I do want to take this opportunity to thank our current student trustees. Your ongoing work and dedication is impressive and inspiring, and your advocacy and insight help make us stronger and more impactful each and every time we meet. It is truly a pleasure to work with you. And that isn't, of course, the last word, because I know this is not your last meeting, but I can't really talk about student trustees without giving you a shout out. So, at this point, I will now move on with this evening's agenda. I think I have talked long enough, and I know there are many other things to cover this evening. So at this point, we are on item number 10, which is report from trustees appointed to external organizations and our student trustees. So Ms. Joseph Dowers, do we have any reports on external? Okay, no. So I will turn it over to our student trustees who have a fulsome report. And I would just remind people that it is also in their blue folders.
Test.
Hello. Okay.
Okay, thank you through you, Madam Chair. As you actually mentioned, we have a loaded report tonight, and good evening to everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. So starting with our report in the news, the student trustees appeared on City News and discussed school violence, the root cause of violence in Toronto schools, calling for holistic solutions to prevent further incidents in the communities. We were also featured on a supporting article that was titled TDSB Student Trustees, Discovering Root Cause of School Violence is Key to Prevention. As well, the student trustees also had an interview with School Magazine about school violence coming out soon. And I was also featured on a Toronto Star article calling for telecoms to provide cell phone service on the TTC, where I commented about my personal experiences on transit.
Next on our report, we have Deconstructing Anti-Black Racism, IDC4U motion. The student trustees have recently submitted a notice of motion with the support of trustees Dawson and King. The intent of the motion is to have the chair write a letter to the Minister of Education and ask the current Deconstructing Anti-Black Racism course, which is code IDC4U, offered at an interdisciplinary level, to get its own course code to enable more students to take the course and have a standard curriculum for all Ontario schools.
Next on our report this evening, we have the Know Your Worth Conference. Student trustees Musa and Osero had the opportunity to discuss the opening remarks, or rather to provide opening remarks in this year's Know Your Worth Conference. This year's theme was Afrocentric Education is Transformative. They talked about the board prioritizing the acknowledgement of Afrocentric pedagogies, programming, education, and dismantling anti-Black racism in all of our schools. Next is the Indigenous student trustee applications. Indigenous student trustee applications closed on April 14th, 2023. There has been a total of 4 applicants. This is the highest number of applicants for the role we've had since the establishment.
Next up, we have, I cut you off.
Sorry. Where am I? The committee tasked with the appointment and shortlisting has begun its work and will present a recommendation to the Elders Council. And we look forward to presenting the future Indigenous student trustee at the June board meeting. My apologies.
And my apologies as well. I got a little bit too excited. Next up, we have student safety. So the student trustees met with students who have been affected by school violence at York Memorial CI. We're happy to report that they have noticed a great great improvements within their schools and feel safe and welcomed.
Next up, we have the TDSB Student Senate Grade 9 and 10 retreat. So this weekend, the Senate and student trustees, along with over 60 students across the district school board, will be heading to Monoclis for our annual student leadership retreat. This is the first time we've held such an event since the pandemic, and we're excited for a weekend of fun and engaging leadership activities.
Next on our report this evening is the International Day of Pink. I had the pleasure to speak at the International Day of Pink celebration at York Mills CI. This year we had an amazing performance by the York Mills dance team, as well as Canada Drag Race winner Isis Couture. We also heard from Martin Boyce, Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey, Director Russell Rollins, a Toronto Police Sergeant whose last name, unfortunately, I cannot pronounce, and Omid Razivi, as well as Chair Chernos Lynn.
Next up is the HIP Youth to Youth Conference. So Indigenous Student Trustee had the pleasure and opportunity to go to Manitoba for a national conference for youth on peace building, truth and reconciliation, and environmental sustainability. It was an excellent opportunity to meet like-minded youth and engage in meaningful conversations about the aforementioned subjects, as well as make lasting relationship with the youth across from Canada.
I just want to add that Manitoba was a lot of fun. It was very cold. I did not pack enough jackets.
Next up, we have the keynote with I Think, University of Toronto. So Indigenous Student Trustee Shafkat was recently a keynote for UFT's I Think classroom project and spoke to the importance of rebuilding community within school post-pandemic and the impact of an inspirational, caring adult.
Next on our student trustee report is my personal favorite and the most exciting. The student trustees are excited to announce the first ever Student Trustees Awards for Student Excellence. These awards are by students for students. For the 2022-2023 school year, there are 2 award categories. The first one being Leadership in Combating Hate and Racism, and the second award category being Academic Achievement and Community Engagement. These awards will recognize outstanding students in the TDSB with 2 recipients from each learning center. We look forward to highlighting some outstanding students in June.
The student trustees also met with the Toronto Youth Cabinet to discuss the upcoming mayoral by-election. It was agreed that youth need to be active in municipal politics, and the student trustees are planning on an awareness campaign to encourage youth to go out and vote, which is similar to what the student trustees last year, and Isaiah was part of it, did with the provincial elections.
Next up, we have the OHRC Anti-Black Racism Student Roundtable. So Student Trustee Musa has been invited to participate in a student roundtable with the Ontario Human Rights Commission on tackling anti-Black racism in Ontario's education system, which will be taking place tomorrow.
Apologies, we are a little discombobulated this evening. I, alongside Trustee Ehrenhardt, spoke at a parent-led rally for education in Toronto's East End 2 weekends ago. This was an excellent opportunity for parents and students to share their concerns and demand for more funding from the province to best serve students and their needs.
Now it's my turn. Youth Art Gallery, Indigenous Student Trustee Shafkat, alongside Toronto Indigenous Youth Council Chair Michael Peters, had the opportunity to speak at a youth-led art gallery in Markham. Shafkat and Peters spoke about the importance of awareness of Indigenous cultures and highlighted the importance of language and education.
Yep. And for our final item on our report, meeting with youth leaders. So Indigenous Student Trustee Shafkat recently traveled to Kingston, Ontario, to meet with local student leaders to discuss ways to engage students and various initiatives to support student engagement and success. Discussion was also centered about rebuilding a sense of belonging within schools and what some challenges various boards are facing. Thank you, everyone, and that is our report for today.
We are happy to take any questions trustees may have, and thank you for listening to our very long report. It's been a long, busy month.
Thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing any questions, but it is amazing what you guys pack into a month. So especially considering it's grade 12 year. Okay, so next on the agenda, we would normally have the director's leadership report. But I think seeing as it's 7:45 and we have a timed item at 7:45, which is item number 15, I would like to just do declarations of possible, I would ask, I guess, to reorder the agenda slightly to do items 12, 13, and then move to the timed item and then go back to the director's leadership report. Do I need to do anything for that? Okay, so that's what we're going to do, seeing no objections. So can I just ask if there are any declarations of possible conflict of interest from trustees? Not seeing any, we will move on to item number 13, which is matters to be decided without discussion. So the items this evening that are to be decided without discussion that go on the consent agenda are item 14, item 16.11, 16.21, 16. All of 16.2. 16.41 and 16.52. Everything else will be voted on independently. So at this point, we will move to our timed item. Oh, I need a mover and a seconder for the items on consent. Trustee Dawson and Trustee Patel, all in favor, we'll do show of hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, that has carried. So next we will move to our timed item, which is item number 15, which is reports from the Office of the Integrity Commissioner. So I would like to welcome Michael Maynard, who is our Integrity Commissioner, and he will be speaking to items number 15.1 and 15.2. Good evening.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Maynard?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and trustees, staff. It's a pleasure to be here. I believe the first item for me to present tonight, I have two reports on your agenda. The first one is our annual report from the operating period, or for the operating period rather, from February 14th, 2022 to February 13th, 2023. I don't really have any comments to make about that report. It is before you and covers all the material that that we wanted to put before you. So I'm happy to take any questions on that report for clarification purposes at this time.
Okay, do trustees have any questions for Mr. Maynard? I'm not seeing any in the chat or online, so we will just, oh, wait one moment. Trustee Laskin has a question.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if you will consider this in order or not, but I wondered if Mr. Maynard reviewed the proposed Bill 98 that speaks to the Integrity Commissioner, and if he has any comments.
Thank you for the comments, or for the question rather. So I don't have any comments at this time. I think we're still sort of digesting it. But you know, generally speaking, and this is sort of something I think that we've been expecting, that that Integrity Commissioner services will be sort of rolled out and become mandatory for education, the education sector, as it is in the municipal sector. So I'm not really surprised about that, but I would need time to fully review that and digest it. I don't have any other comments at this point.
Thank you very much, Michael. I need a mover and a seconder for receipt of this report. I see Trustee Didavides and Trustee Rajikulasingham. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and that has carried. So now we're going to move on to item number 15.2. So back over to you, Mr. Maynard.
Thank you. So the second report that I have before you today is a report on a code of conduct complaint inquiry that was conducted by our office. Again, the report speaks for itself. It lays out the entire process of the inquiry, including the timeline of the inquiry, which was somewhat extended due to the election period. Of course, inquiries need to be suspended during the election period and cannot continue at that point. And then there were some other complications which are dealt with in the body of the report itself. And of course, at the end of this report, it is indicated, and I delegated the investigation of this to an independent investigator within my office, Mr. Barry Bresner, who found that there was a breach of Section 6.8 of the code. But for the reasons set out in the report, Mr. Bresner and myself have recommended that there is no sanction arising from this. And again, that's for the reasons that are already set out in the report. What's necessary at this point for the board under the Education Act, it requires that when you become aware of a code of conduct complaint, that the board conducts inquiries about that. That job has been done. It was obviously delegated to our office as the Integrity Commissioner. The inquiry phase is done. What it remains to be done at this point is for the board to make a determination as to whether the code was breached. So we have a report before you that provides our evidence and our opinion about that, but it is up to the board to decide whether or not the code was breached. And if it is decided that the code was breached, then the board would turn its mind to potential sanctions for that breach. I have no further comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I thank the Integrity Commissioner for his work, but I would like to move on behalf of the board that the code was not breached and that there be no further action taken. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Williams. Okay. Any comment from trustees on this item? We have a motion before us. Okay, not seeing any. So are we doing this by e-scribe? No, Trustee Lee, please go ahead.
Sorry, thank you through you, Madam Chair. I just want to inquire from the movers of this motion, her reasoning and her belief on what the motion that she's moving. Thank you.
It's a little bit hard to hear what you said, Trustee Lee.
I would just like to ask the movers of this motion to help explain to us their reasoning and belief behind the motion. Thank you.
Very much through to Trustee Lee, through you, Madam Chair. There is a lot of history and a lot of context with this committee, and I just felt that the interpretation of the complaint, I just did not support it. And therefore I'm moving to say no. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further questions, so I think we're doing this by show of hands. Okay, so all those in favor of Trustee, I'm sorry, please go ahead, Trustee Rajagulusingham.
Through the chair, Trustee Laskin mentioned something. I was asking if she may elaborate, because I'm also not aware of the context of what happened. So just wondering I'm not sure if it's appropriate to maybe ask the commissioner to elaborate on his report, or just to provide more context for those of us that may not be aware of what took place.
So there is detail in the report that was provided. I can ask. So I would just ask the Integrity Commissioner, since we do happen to have you on the line, if you could just elaborate for trustees about the circumstances around this.
Sure. I don't really have anything to add that's not already in the report. The report speaks for itself. The report makes mention of the fact that there have been some issues of conflict in that particular committee and involving the involved parties in this report. Of course, The complainant in this case has been anonymized for the purposes of the report, but was not anonymous through the process. So everyone involved in the inquiry process, including the respondent, knew who everyone was, but we've done an anonymization of that individual with respect to this report because it's public facing. And that's in keeping with standard procedures that we followed before with the board. But there was as mentioned, there is a history of conflict there. Irrespective of that, of course, my investigator, Mr. Bresner, said that and found that, there is a high bar that is required of members of the board of trustees. And because of that, there was a technical breach of 6.8. in his view, and I agree with that view. Of course, it's up to the board to determine whether or not there was actually a breach. We would simply provide our recommendations and opinions on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any online either. So at this point, we will call the question. So all those in favor of Trustee Laskin's motion?
Sriskandarajah in favor online.
Thank you very much, Trustee.
Earhart in favor online.
That was Earhart. Any opposed? I see one opposed. And that has carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the Integrity Commissioner for your work on this. And
thank you.
For the annual report. And thank you for your brief appearance. Important.
My pleasure. I'm always happy to speak with all of you and to see you, maybe one day in person.
That would be nice. Okay, yeah. So moving on to we are going to go back now in order to item number 11, which is the Director's Leadership Report. So I will pass the microphone over to Director Colleen Russell-Rollins for her report.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. Good evening, staff, students, community members, and trustees. Tonight, my leadership report will cover 4 areas: unleashing learning, global citizenship education in the TDSB, some work by our Student Equity Collective entitled Speak Up, Show Us How You Combat Hate and Racism, TDSB Cares, and student achievements in digital innovations. The theme of digital learning will be woven throughout most of the topics in this evening's leadership report. The content of the report tonight, I think, illustrates the ways in which TDSB is truly transforming learning for both students and staff. If you don't recognize some of the terms, that's okay, because many of these terms describe the ways in which digital learning is actually pushing students' thinking and design. So let me start with what's on my t-shirt, which was Unleashing Learning. Yesterday was our first in-person Unleashing Learning event for educators since 2019. I was pleased to open the conference for over 1,000 TDSB staff. Educators who attended also had access to over 120 sessions supporting their professional learning in the areas of global competencies and technology, transforming student learning with the use of assistive technology, and classroom and experiential learning opportunities, just to name a few topics. Teachers who are digital lead learners showcased their learning through a marketplace, which featured applications like Jamboards in the early years, Google Slides, Beyond the Basics, and Adobe Express for oral presentations. Throughout the entire day, there was careful consideration of how to use these trends in technology to differentiate both instruction and assessment to help ensure that students are not just consumers of technology, but that they also learn to use technology to create. The day ended with a fabulous keynote speaker, Takara Small. Many of you may know her from CBC Metro Morning as a technology contributor. Ms. Small delivered the keynote address on what it means to be a positive digital citizen and finding wellness in a world of social media and approaching AI in education from a stance of critical digital literacy. This event would not have been possible without the leadership of Executive Officer Peter Singh, the amazing IT team, which I called the green shirt people throughout the day, all of the organizers, our corporate sponsors who contributed to absolutely making this possible for the TDSB, and the extraordinary educators who made Unleashing Learning 2023 possible. I celebrate all of you. Next on to global citizenship education. Unleashing Learning was a demonstration of the collective dedication of so many of our educators to critical global citizenships skills, developing critical global citizenship skills in our students. Many of you will have heard us talk about this previously, the critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and leadership skills that are developed. Specifically, educators across the TDSB are also honoring UNDRIP and Truth and Reconciliation in their work by placing ecological stewardship and Indigenous ways of knowing within digital learning and innovation. I'd like to talk a little bit about the exploration classrooms. These are led by hybrid teachers, digital lead learners. So they teach a classroom, but then for part of the day, they open their classrooms to other educators to see their practice, and they talk about how they have built student learning using different types of technology. Teachers have had the opportunity to visit these classrooms and learn more about creativity and inquiry through podcasts, from texts emerging from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultures in the MBE3 courses, the development of transferable skills through instructional strategies that focus on joy and global competence in grade 9 English, and collaboration using ICS4U to support students' metacognition and leadership, which will support them post-secondary. And finally, there was an initiative called Paddling on Both Sides of the Canoe. It focuses on Indigenous science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, medicines, and design. Guided by Tanya Senk and Dr. Duke Redbird, and led by Lee Shepard and Mafuza Rahman, this project supported 20 teachers to collaborate and create opportunities for students that center Indigenous innovation, ingenuity, brilliance, and story. This was so popular, an additional 50 staff have signed up to be part of the 4th day of learning, along with the original 20. I want to thank all of those who make our work to advance global competencies and critical global citizenship, and of course, the leadership of the Urban Indigenous Centers staff. Now on to our student equity collectives. Speak up, show us how you combat hate and racism. I think I've shared with the board that this brilliant group of young people keeps me on my toes, keeps me thinking and questioning what we do in order to better serve them. I've had the pleasure of listening to their ideas. The Equity Collective is inviting students to participate in its first board-wide initiative called Speak Up, Show Us How You Combat Hate and Racism. I will let the promotional video and fantastic example of a student entry tell you more.
My name is Fatima and I'm in grade 12. Black Brilliance was an organization created to by Black students for Black students to help raise awareness of different Black matters. Black Brilliance helps raise awareness about issues that matter to me, such as colorism. When being faced with colorism in my school, my friends and I are able to overcome it because we know our self-worth. With what we've taken away from Black Brilliance, we are able to put up a shield to defend ourselves against this negativity and prosper with our newfound self-confidence.
I'm Nathan, I'm in grade 10. Working with the Jewish Student Union helps fight hate and racism through the idea of fighting hatred through education. So the interesting part about it is that a lot of the people in the Jewish Student Union aren't actually Jewish. So a lot of them are like friends, people who other people bring along to kind of help everyone experience Jewish culture. And that kind of helps bring other people into the Jewish culture and help them better understand this culture that's so different from theirs. One cool thing that I was able to do actually is that I was invited to go back to my elementary school for a day and give a presentation on the Holocaust. By making these presentations and that promoting this idea of fighting hatred through education, we can then promote the idea of other people taking their own initiatives to fight hatred and discrimination in their own ways, using their own initiative.
What are you doing to fight hate and racism in your schools? Record a short video telling us about how you're making a difference in your schools and submit it to us using the link below.
How do we combat hate and racism at Highland Middle School? I'm Ariel.
I'm Parnia.
And I'm Akbar. And today, we're going to share with you some of the great ways Highland combats hate and racism.
In our school community, we combat hate and racism in many different ways to create a safe and welcoming environment. In our own varied classroom, we are educated on inclusivity, equity, diversity, social justice, and anti-oppression, as these topics are critical to be added to class discussions.
If you take a walk around our school, you can see excellent examples of student work representing our learning about these topics. Social justice slogans and posters to show our awareness, artwork to express our identities, and microaggression art are just a few examples of how important social justice and anti-discrimination are to our school. Highland makes an effort to teach everyone about different cultures and heritage. At our monthly assemblies, we've learned about celebrations from various backgrounds and religions. I've learned about celebrations such as Diwali, Chinese New Year, Nowruz, and more. Our school has taught me so much about people's differences. Learning about each culture, heritage, and festival has really opened everyone's eyes to a whole different experience. In addition, our school also invites people who talk about their experiences with racism, bullying, unfairness, and how we can take action against it. How do you combat hate and racism at Highland Middle School?
Well, when one of my friends was being racist, I said, hey, that's not good.
Highland has thrived on making a comfortable setting for all students where they're able to express their identity and heritage, knowing they'll be accepted and supported by their peers.
The more we educate others on discrimination, the more we can combat against it. Change starts with us, and together, we can learn to overcome hate with love, allyship, and harmony.
By the way, we welcome. Thank you. By the way, we welcome trustees to continue to promote this in your school communities. The collective has extended the deadline for students to submit videos to May the 10th. Now on to TDSB Cares. TDSB has had a long history of rallying together to support global relief efforts. Thanks to the generosity of the TDSB community, the campaign to support Turkey and Syria's earthquake relief earned over $100,000 and provided immediate relief and ongoing humanitarian assistance to those impacted by the earthquakes. I want to thank the student, staff, parents, guardians, caregivers, and other members of the TDSB community for their caring and for their financial support. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to two groups of students from Zion Heights Middle School. They were the recent winners of two very meaningful digital technology competitions conducted by Tata Consultancy Services. A team of grade 8 students earned the opportunity to compete for Tata Consultancy Services Go IT Innovator of the Year after winning the Toronto Marathon Go IT Challenge and coming in third place at the Go IT Americas Challenge. The students placed 6th overall among 25 teams for a litter reduction app they created called GoTO, which aims to make Toronto cleaner by encouraging residents to start cleaning up litter today. A second team of students from Zion were the recipients of the North America Go IT Monthly Challenge for February 2023 with their concept for an app that would reduce hunger. I am so proud of our students and our staff for embracing these opportunities to learn and showcase what they have learned with others around the world. So congratulations to everyone at Zion Heights Middle School, particularly the students who were part of the Go IT challenges, and to their teacher, Ms. Cattle, for their outstanding designs and digital innovations. I'm incredibly proud of the extraordinary learning opportunities happening not just in the schools that were featured tonight, but across the Toronto District School Board. And I want to thank our staff, students, and families for everything that they do to help us transform learning every day in our schools. This concludes my leadership report for this evening.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins. I believe we do have a comment from one trustee. Trustee DeVitis, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment. I was going to do this in any case, and the fact that yesterday's event was part of your report makes it possible. I can thank you and your team for putting together that event. I got a number of messages and pictures from some of the folks that were participating. And we talked this year about joy in learning, and joy in teaching, and being able to share. And it was exciting to see the happiness and some of the comments and feelings that people were sharing, and being able to learn and be better in our profession, educating. And that is an exciting thing to see in a congregate setting that's been difficult for the last few years. And just want to take an opportunity to thank you, Director, and your team for all the great work that you did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee DeVitis. Okay, we are going to move on to item number 14. I know please go ahead, Trustee Dawson.
Sorry, point of personal privilege. I just would like to retroactively declare a conflict of interest with item 15.2. As I was a member of the BSAT committee at the time, I just would like to note that I did not vote on that matter tonight. Thank you.
Correct. I did see you leave the room, so thank you for letting us know, Trustee Dawson. Okay, so item number 14 is confirmation of minutes of the meetings held on March 8th and 30th, 2023. Oh, my apologies. I'm going straight to item number, what about 16.21? Oh, why do I have that circled? Okay, sorry, I had something circled by accident. Item number 16.3. Finance, Budget, and Enrollment Committee. This was the special meeting that went over that was on Monday, April 24th. My brain is foggy today. I'm so sorry. Okay, so can I have a move? No, I don't. Do I need a mover and a seconder? We'll have staff introduce this report first and do questions. Okay, so to the director, who will be speaking to this?
Thank you very much. Associate Director Zucker will speak to this report.
Thank you, and through the chair, as trustees are aware, the GSN was released on April 17th.
along with a number of other memos that have been referenced in the presentation that was provided. So although staff are still working through the calculations and information to determine the exact impact on TDSB, I'm going to provide a little bit of an update on high-level information about the changes to the GSN for 23-24. So the first highlight is that there is a new funding formula for student transportation. The funding formula redistributes the existing funding among boards, so some boards will receive more funding and some less. TDSB will receive more funding. The projections show an increase for TDSB of about $13 million. However, staff is working through the requirements of the new funding. We know that there are additional costs that the board will incur, and I'll give you an example. The ministry used to provide the driver retention bonus directly to the providers, and now it is being flowed through the board and is part of that additional $13 million. There's also a requirement for the average driver salary to be $23 per hour, and the component related to compensation is enveloped. So again, there is additional funding provided to TDSB, and we will determine how much of that will have to be spent on additional costs versus how much of it will be able to help us in balancing our budget. There's also funding included in the GSN to fund remote learning, including principals, vice principals, office staff, and IT, based on the enrollment in remote learning. However, the enrollment will now not be included in the calculation of the funding for school-based and school facility-based allocations. So we're, again, determining the impact and whether or not there's actually a detrimental impact to the board through providing funding this way. There's also funding for safe and clean schools, $1.2 million for TDSB to support student well-being and maintain clean schools. There are labor-related increases. The GSN includes a $1 per hour increase for educational workers and a 1.25% increase for teachers, but boards must also include the expenses related to these increases in their budget. So that increase in funding will equate to an increase in expenses as well. Important to note under the labor related that there is no funding in the GSN related to the increase in statutory benefits and costs related to sick leave. Over the last 5 years, these costs have increased for TDSB by $47.3 million. 28.8 of it alone is the result of increases in CPP, of which TDSB has no control. There was a realignment of the Indigenous education funding. Boards are required to offer First Nation, Métis, and Inuit studies courses in schools if the enrollment in a class is at least 8. The ministry will continue to supplement courses where the funding is, where the enrollment is greater than 8 and less than 23. So any difference between 8 and 23 will be supplemented. However, when enrollment is greater than 23, there will be no additional supplement. So again, staff is working through the impact that will have on TDSB. In addition, some of the priorities and partnership funding has been moved to the GSN. So although there is no change in overall funding, it does increase GSN funding. And it does provide stability. So usually when something's included in the GSN, it does mean that there will be continued support for that component of the grant. There was a 2% increase in non-staff portion of the school operations allocation. So that 2% was to assist in managing the increase in commodity prices like utilities, for example. The ministry also announced that it will be reviewing the special incidents portion allocation as part of the special education grant, and that as a result, rather than an application basis, in 2023-24, the grant will be based on historical funding. In addition, through this report, staff outlined updated budget timelines where the updated financial position will be presented to trustees on May 15th. So that $63.2 million deficit, once we analyze the GSNs and look at the changes that have already been made, we will be able to bring trustees an updated position. Then we will bring options to balance on June 1st. There will be public information sessions during the week of June 5th. There's a special meeting scheduled to hear delegations, and that will be scheduled for June 12th. There will be a discussion of all the feedback and recommendations on June 13th. It's proposed that the final budget will be presented on June 22nd, and that there would be a special board meeting on June 28th to approve the budget before the June 30th deadline. We do recognize that these timelines are tight in order to meet the June 30th deadline. We also recognize that there may be, depending on the situation that we find ourselves in after we look at our financial position on May 15th, require additional time to review the budget. So we will continue to review to look at possibly adding dates. And in addition, trustees made us aware that June 28th, there are a number of graduations and asked us to look at the possibility of changing that date. So in the meantime, we will be putting a hold on trustees' calendars for those dates as we review the possibilities of any changes and would update trustees as soon as possible. So happy to answer any questions, through the chair.
Trustee Arts.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. So we recognize that costs are higher in Toronto, the cost of living, the cost of goods and services, the cost of property. So within the GSNs, does the ministry differentiate funding to take into account the differences in costs between different areas of the province?
So thank you, and through the chair, the GSN is meant to provide equal funding to boards across the province, and the calculation of the GSN does just that. There are supplements in some cases, like for northern boards, where the province does recognize additional costs, but there are no additional costs or recognition of additional costs for TDSB. What I wanted to indicate, however, is that the funding is provided by the province directly, does differ from board to board. The GSN is received from two sources. One, the municipal taxes collected from businesses and homeowners as part of our property taxes. And then the second way is that the difference between the GSN calculated and the amount that we receive through municipal taxes comes directly from the province. So in 2021-22, the average amount that municipal taxes contributed to the GSNs in different boards across the province was 18%. In Toronto, the amount of GSN that came from municipal taxes is 56%. So quite a significant difference, recognizing that there are, when the percentage is equal across the province, it does recognize that the costs are higher in Toronto, specifically related to properties, and then therefore the amount that we receive through municipal taxes is higher. Just wanted to note as well that the next highest board, and it being our coterminous board, is at 45%. So the average is about 18, 82% of it coming from the ministry. And then ours is 56, with 44% of it coming from the ministry directly.
So could I ask staff to send us those numbers and in whatever format, include that in our budget website, that we provide information to the public on our budget process and the numbers that we have to consider. So my understanding, if I got this correct, was that the City of Toronto subsidizes education for the province and for the Catholic Board, since we would garner the same municipal tax base in Toronto Catholic as we would in the TDSB, and yet we get less money from the province per student or on a percentage basis. Could you clarify? We know that programming and services within the education sector depends on staff. they don't run without staff. That's our main cost, is staffing. So how many staff could we have hired to support students with the cost of statutory benefits?
So thank you, and through the chair, if we were just looking at teachers staffing, we would be looking at approximately 430 additional teachers that could be hired with the $47.3 million difference over the last 5 years.
Thank you. And lastly, it's my understanding that school boards were expecting the Ministry of Education to have adjusted the special incidents portion of special education funding for the current year. My understanding is that the province gives school boards approximately $27,000 and change per student, but these students actually require 2 staff members to staff them. So that's, to me, it seems to be about a quarter of a staff person per student that the ministry is funding. And as you said, we boards are then having to subsidize. Can you confirm that that's correct?
So thank you, and through the chair. So the special incidents portion is $27,000 per student based on an application basis for students that require 2 adults to support them on a regular basis. So you're correct. We receive $27,000, and that does not cover the cost of the 2 staff members.
Okay, thank you. So I have a business arising when we're finished with questions and finished with this item. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Trustee McLean, followed by, we have a speakers list that's growing. Trustee McLean, Didavides, Lee, and then myself.
Thank you, and through the chair. There was a lot made of the Minister of Education's Back to Basics announcement, which happened to be on the same day as the GSNs. And so I was curious, how much new funding for mathematics will the TDSB receive over the amount we received last year?
Thank you, and through the chair, in previous years, the province provided through the PPFs about $4.8 million for TDSB related to math strategy. They are providing less than $500,000 more than that for their new math program. So the $4.8 million of math strategy is discontinued, and the new math announcement will be funded through that funding.
Thank you, and again, through the chair. We traditionally, the TDSB, we spend more on the education of students with special needs, more than we received from the province. So I was curious if you could highlight the last couple of years in terms of how much more we spent than we are funded, and if there were additional revenues stated this year in the GSN that might reflect a substantial ability to cut into and alleviate that situation.
So thank you, and through the chair, that information is available in the financial facts, and I'm just pulling up to make sure that I have the correct amounts. But we are, as trustees know, when we receive the grant for special education, we are required to spend that money on special education, and we cannot spend less. And we have no problems doing this. Over the last 5 years, in 2018-19, we had a deficit of $48.5 million. Also in 1920, the same amount. $35 million in 2021, and again, 2021 is a difficult year to compare because of the differences related to COVID. In 21-22, we have a deficit of 75 million in special education. And in 22-23, we were projected to have a deficit of 67.5 million. Sorry, and through the chair, we did not receive any additional funding.
Okay, thank you, Trustee McLean. Next up, we have Trustee Didavides. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, I just want to go back to the percentages that you were speaking about. I want to help clarify some of those numbers, if you don't mind. So if I can maybe use an average student in Ontario, the province provided numbers, and an average student, as I understand it, receives about $13,000, a little bit over $13,000 on average across the province. So what would be the percentage in total terms for that average student from the property tax base, the City of Toronto? What would come from the province? How would you break that down? Fractions, excuse me.
Through the chair, so if we're looking at the province and in the GSN announcement, they did indicate that the average amount that they receive is $13,125. The province would be providing in TDSB 44%, so about $6,000 of that $13,125, and the average across the province would be providing $10,750 approximately. So the difference is over $4,000, almost $5,000 difference between what the province provides to Toronto versus what the province provides on an average to boards across Ontario.
Thank you for the clarification, and just I guess to share as well, folks may not know this, but the amount of money that the City of Toronto collects in property taxes for education, so what they collect for education, is bigger than the amount of grants that the City of Toronto receives. So if the monies didn't go to the Ministry of Education from the City of Toronto, and they didn't receive any money from the province, they would be better off ahead. So in effect, the City of Toronto as a whole is subsidizing other municipalities and their school boards. So I think this is significant because there's an inherent unfairness in that process. And it's not to say that we don't need to help school boards in the north, but we also need to, and other jurisdictions that have a smaller property tax base. But the City of Toronto is the most expensive place to live in Ontario. And as Trustee McLean was just explaining, we're not necessarily getting the resources that we need. The equation doesn't work for your average student in the City of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Lee, you're up next.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Associate Director Zucker, just have a quick question to follow up on my colleague Trustee Didavides' question. Do we have any idea on what a school board like the YRDSB receives from the province?
So thank you, and through the chair, again, what I've done is review the financial statements of the 21-22 fiscal year. And at that time, again, Toronto would have received 44% from the province. The next closest were York Region and Toronto Catholic, both at 55%. And then the majority, like I said, the average across the province is 82%. So our neighboring boards, I think what it's saying is in larger municipalities, the percentages are a little bit lower.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, does that mean that if the TDSB is being treated equitably by the province, that's our co-located board and neighboring boards, which really shares the same metropolitan area, we should have on average around $1,500 per year in student GSNs, considering that the people of Toronto has funded us for already 55% of our funding.
Through the chair, yeah, that math works. And what I'd say is the percentage that homeowners across the province are charged for the education portion of their property taxes is the same. It's the fact that the properties in Toronto are worth more, and therefore, as a percentage, they're paying more for property tax.
And frankly, thank you, Associate Director. That's very helpful. And to my dear colleagues, and I think anyone and everyone who is listening, I think this is the root cause of a lot of our issues. Is $1,500 per student multiplied by 200 or almost 250,000 students. A lot of the things that we will be talking about in the next month and a half, actually 2.5 months, will have to do with budgets. And we're going to be making decisions. And when we do that, just remember that $1,500 multiplied by 250,000 students is what we're actually making up for. And with that amount of money, we can solve so many problems, so many gaps that we have identified within our board. If there's a point of advocacy, and I look to staff to help us with this as well, I think that is it. We do have a higher cost base in the city of Toronto. For a variety of very good reasons, but we are being treated the same way, in which, and that what that actually means is the province is treating our students less equitably than the province is treating some other areas. And that the parents of Toronto, they're paying a higher property taxes for their kids to receive a lower quality education at the TDSB. That is not acceptable to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. I'll pass the chair, if it's okay, over to you, Vice Chair Shen.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Chanaslin.
So I just had a question for staff on the interim special incidents portion funding, this what was referred to as the SIP funding. I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of understanding. I understand. My knowledge of this is that it's directly tied to how we are funded for students with exceptional special needs, complex special needs. And my understanding is there was supposed to be a reevaluation of how this funding works. It was supposed to be adjusted, but right now there's been a pause, and that we're going back to historical funding while the ministry figures out how they're going to fund it in the future. And I'm wondering what the impact of that means for TDSB. As I understand, I mean, I know we have a very large number of students with special needs, but particularly also students with complex medical and physical needs. And we spend considerably more funding our students with special education needs than we are funded for, which we have heard about tonight. So this pause, I guess I would say, and this going back to historical, and perhaps a change that it's ushering in a change in how they're going to fund this in the future. What does that mean for TDSB? And what does that mean for our students?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I would ask Associate Director Zarisco to respond, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, the special incident portion is actually, it's a funding line that is retrospective. So every year, our staff connect with schools to understand where we have the highest need students who are needing 2 or more staff to support them to be successful. Make no mistake that we will always be supporting students with extraordinarily complex needs. When we send an application to the ministry, we're looking backwards over the course of the year to say, let us tell you about student Louise and the support that she is requiring, with the intention of receiving that funding back to our special education grant so that we can be sure that we are meeting the needs of our students to the very, very best of our ability as a board. The ministry has acknowledged that the benchmark of $27,000 for application that is approved really does not represent the investment that the Toronto District School Board needs to put in place for our most complex students. So they were wanting to understand what is a more appropriate benchmark for 2023. In addition, the application process is very intensive. So directors across the province have been acknowledging this to the ministry and advocating, and they have said that they would be looking at the process. Through the pandemic, they stopped our application processes because of how labor intensive it was, and we were obviously supporting the pandemic. What it means for the Toronto District School Board not to have this revised is that the data point at which we are funded for SIP for our most complex students is very dated. We can be assured that because the number of students who have autism continues to increase, the number of students with special education needs continues to grow in its complexity, means that the difference in our funding to be supporting those most complex students continues to grow. So it is a disappointment here that the ministry has not engaged in the review that they had indicated that they were wanting to accomplish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that really excellent unpacking of a fairly complex situation. I really do believe that this is a significant issue for the TDSB. We have 12 congregated sites. We have a number of ISP classes throughout our system where we're working to really ensure students are included in their local schools wherever possible. But all of these measures take resources and support in order to make sure these students are supported and are able to learn to the best of their abilities. So we will be presenting, Trustee Arts and I will be presenting some emotion arising as business arising after this. But I think this is something we really need to keep the pressure on the ministry to ensure that we have so many things, it feels like, where the benchmarks are dated. It would be, to add another one would be a huge challenge for TDSB, especially when we know that the students we support have complex needs, and that, as you mentioned, that has been growing over the years. So I will end it at that, but I thank staff for their explanation and hope that trustees will support.
Thank you. I'll pass the chair back to you, Chair Chancellor.
Thank you. We have a few more trustees on the list. We have Trustee Earhart, followed by Laskin and Dawson.
Thanks very much. And through the chair, just thanks to all of the other trustees for their questions. They've been the responses have been very helpful in understanding this very upsetting situation with the GSNs. I attended the finance committee where we heard an update. And so I just wanted to echo some questions and answers that I heard there, just to make sure that it was also clear for anybody watching tonight. Based on preliminary reviews, and understand we will get more information on May 15th, my understanding is that within the GSNs and the announcements that the Minister of Education made last week, we did not hear anything about ongoing tutoring support into the summer. We heard specifically that pandemic costs, including depleted reserves, would not be covered by the ministry. And we heard that statutory benefits, it was shown that they weren't covered. So that means that we are still in a significant deficit situation moving forward. Is that correct?
Through the chair, as staff works through those calculations, I would say it's fair to say that this would have not solved our $63.2 million deficit. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. So $63.2 million deficit, the exact figures to be confirmed as we go through, but still significant deficit. And nearly all of the areas where we have been asking as a board for the ministry to consider support were not taken on. Is that correct? Through the chair?
Through the chair, based on the advocacy letters of the board, those issues that were raised have mostly not been addressed. That's correct.
Which is extremely disappointing as a trustee, as a TDSB parent, and as a community representative because I know that everyone in my community, those who work for public schools, those who bring their children to public schools, we all want to see our schools succeed, and we know we have to address the deficit to do so. So I'm extremely disappointed that that was not addressed. And just one more, I know I've asked this before, just to reconfirm, we are still providing monthly updates to the ministry on the financial position. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay, so it's reasonable to assume that the minister is aware of the significant deficit situation of the largest school board in the province and has chosen to do nothing. And that is extremely disappointing. And just thank you to everyone who continues to do the work here. No further questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee Earhart. Up next, Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was just writing a few notes. This conversation reminds me of every conversation since 1998. When the Fewer School Boards Act, Bill 104, was introduced in January of 1997, and the government removed the taxing ability of school boards. We are beholden to the province. Our money is raised, it goes into the pot, and it is equally distributed out. There is no equity involved. And that is a point being raised by my other colleagues tonight, is that, you know, seriously, since amalgamation, we have never been able to fund education to the expectations of our students and their families. I'm not saying pre-amalgamation was perfect. I was at many meetings where there were hordes of the public, you know, complaining. Then the crowd was mostly middle-aged and senior citizens as opposed to people with kids in schools, because it was your taxes paid for education in your city. So all taxpayers cared about public education. Now it seems we really have to push that public communication message to get people that don't have kids in school to care about the quality of our public education. Sadly, every single budget cycle, we are faced with inadequate funding that truly supports the needs of the students in the City of Toronto. And the reality is, I remember that first budget report in 1998, I think we called it the tip of the iceberg, because we knew that as year after year after year, we would be under this funding model. We knew that the structural gaps within this board would simply increase, and our financial facts document proves that, and we are very public about that. So yet again, we have GSNs that are inadequate to support students. From our very limited flexible funding, we are spending on things that are unfunded in order to support students from underserved communities that have for years been systemically discriminated against with regard to their academic achievement. So it is of no surprise. What is surprising, however, is that we are being blamed for decision making because we're not efficient or effective. My former colleague, Donna Cansfield, used to call those the effing words. But in fact, we are forced to cut programs and services to pay for things that are completely unfunded and completely out of our control. And a lot of families that have kids with differentiated needs come to Toronto because of our hospitals and our clinics and our clinicians and our supports that we provide and our congregated sites. So it's issue after issue after issue that gets compounded every year. This special education issue is systemic, but really highlighted with the pause. The fact that our benefits, which are as an employer, are imposed on us without any funding source. I mean, I think it's really ridiculous. And I think it's incumbent upon us to continue in public meetings to do what we can to get our public behind us, that there has to be a reconsideration of grants for urban areas, rural areas, remote areas, in addition to the equal distribution of the funding model, because there are different needs to support students in different areas of the city. And certainly the students in Toronto deserve more. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. That was almost on the nose at 5 minutes. Next up, we have Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. I would like to echo my colleagues' sentiments about how frustrating and in fact infuriating this budget situation is. And just sort of in building on something Trustee Laskin mentioned about needing to get the general public angry and also informed of what's going on. I found it really helpful. This is just a comment, not really a question. The information that we received from communications department that we could share on social media. So, you know, the more and more that we can receive that information and in a timely way that we can push it out even weekly is very helpful in getting the message out succinctly in terms of what we're dealing with. Because, you know, I know our meetings can be quite riveting, but I don't know that the entire public is listening. So it is helpful to have those shareables if that could be something that is considered ongoing. Thank you.
You don't think they're listening at 10, 11, quarter to 12 at night? Okay, thank you, Trustee Dawson. So that is the end of the speaker list on this item. So we will open the vote. I think we're using eScribe for this item. So I need a mover and a seconder for this report. Trustee McLean and Trustee DeVitas. And is the vote not yet open? Just give us one moment. Okay, we are not going to use eScribe. We're going to go by show of hands. All those in favor?
Sriskandarajah in favor.
Earhart in favor.
Thank you. And any opposed? Okay, not seeing any, so that has carried unanimously. And I do believe, Trustee Arts, you have business arising.
I do, through you, Madam Chair. Should I wait for it? Can we put it up on screen, please? So I emailed this to trustees earlier in the meeting, but I'll read it out. So the motion is in regards to the special incidents portion of special education funding. This is the funding for students with exceptional needs who need 2 or more staff. Currently, the benchmark funding is $27,000 and change for boards. And we've started to hear from the special education advisory committees from other boards about their disappointment that the SIP funding was not adjusted this year as expected. And it's desperately needed for TDSB and across the province. So whereas the special incidents portion of the special education grant does not adequately fund the staffing needs for students with extraordinary special education needs, and whereas the Ministry of Education has postponed their review of the SIP amount and funding process, and whereas the Toronto District School Board supplements the special education grant to meet the needs of students with special education needs, and whereas special education advisory committees and district school boards across the province are advocating on this important subject, be it resolved that the chair write a letter to the Ministry of Education advocating for immediate review, collaboration, and design of appropriate SIP funding levels and processes to be established. That OBSPA, the Ministries of Health, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services, and all SEACs be copied on the letter in Part A, and that the TDSB SEAC be encouraged to advocate to the ministry on this important topic. And for those who are unaware, our legislated committees, the Special Education Advisory Committee and the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, because they're legislated, actually have an avenue to advocate directly to the Ministry of Education and don't always have to go through us. So they have the opportunity to engage in their own advocacy.
Okay, and I'm the seconder on that. So I'm going to pass the chair.
Go ahead, Trustee Chancellor.
I think Trustee Arts has been, has spoken, oh, sorry. Thank you, Trustee, or Vice Chair Shen. Trustee Arts has really covered this, I think, and my question earlier covered it as well. So I'm just seconding it at this point. I don't think I have anything else to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll cede the chair back. Next is Trustee Mac. Full thing. Okay. Well, next is Trustee McLean.
Chair, for the reasons that my colleague Trustee Laskin mentioned about the hospitals and services and our congregated sites, I have a question for staff. If the benchmark is 27,000, do we have a sense of the average cost to the board for students we are supporting in congregated sites that are in need of special education supports?
Through the chair, yes, we do. Associate Director Sarisco.
Thank you, and through the chair, difficult to quantify, but if we were to look at a class of 6 students with an average support team of 7 adults with an average annual salary of $80,000. The average for just salary costs would be about $90,000 per student. That would not include transportation costs, and all of those 6 students would very likely need specialized transportation costs, as well as specialized equipment for their successful integration and access for programming. So I would estimate costs of over $100,000 per student, minimally.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Is there any other trustees want to ask questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to the vote. Are we doing e-scribe or by hand? Going to e-scribe? Please vote on e-scribe. If you're not logged on to e-scribe, please let us know.
Chernis Lynn in favor.
Thriska Naraja in favor.
Trustee Shan in favor. It came up for me. Took some time, but it came up. Who's missing?
Earhart in favor.
Trustee Lee in favor. Thank you. That motion passes. I'll pass the chair back to Chair Chenaslan.
Okay, thank you very much. And that wraps up item number 16.3. Moving on to item number 16.42. This is the Indigenous education. Sorry.
There was another business.
I'm sorry, under 16.3, there were items 1, 2, 3, and 4. Are you saying we voted on all of them? Thank you.
Sorry, Trustee Laskin. Okay, so we are on the 16.4.2 item. This is the Indigenous Education Annual Report from 2022. And over to the director to provide us with who will be speaking to this report this evening.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. System Superintendent Tanya Sank sends her regrets this evening. In her stead, Executive Superintendent Jim Spiropoulos will speak briefly to this report and answer any questions trustees may have.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins. Good evening, everyone, and through the chair. I'm honored this evening to be a part of the team which is presenting the annual Indigenous Education Report to the board. And before I turn it over to staff, I want to take a couple of minutes to express my deep gratitude to a couple of critically important groups who bring the work that you find in this report to life each and every day. And I will start that expression with the Elders Council. And I want to thank them for their guidance, for their support, and for their inspiration. I want to continue by thanking the many community members who continue to pack the Urban Indigenous Community Advisory Committee month after month in the spirit of partnership. Their volunteerism is deeply appreciated as we continue to move forward in this very important work. I also want to thank the incredible staff at the Urban Indigenous Education Center under the leadership of System Superintendent Sank. I take great pride in saying that their work has firmly placed TDSB as national leaders in urban Indigenous education. And to our staff and students across this entire system, including you trustees, and especially Indigenous student trustee Shafkat, you continue to support this important work in ways that help us to bring our commitments to truth and reconciliation to life on a daily basis. This report is important in terms of update, but what's far more important is that the work that's contained in it is made real every day in schools and classrooms as we continue to work towards achieving the two important goals that we've set out for Indigenous education. The first of those being to support the achievement and well-being of Indigenous students and staff in our system. And secondly, to ensure that Indigenous education, as I mentioned earlier, finds its way into every school, in every classroom. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to centrally assigned principal, Antonino Giambrone, and centrally assigned vice principal, Robert DeRoche, to present this report in more detail. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, through the chair, Executive Superintendent Spiropoulos. Honored to be presenting alongside centrally assigned Vice Principal Robert DeRoche some key highlights of this report, the Indigenous Education Annual Report. And the report is organized based on the 7 canopy teachings of Elder Dr. Duke Redbird, who also wrote the beautiful foreword within the report. We will share some key highlights in each under each canopy highlighted in the report. And I am wondering if it is possible to share a presentation, the slide deck on the screen at this point. Would that be a possibility?
Are we able to share that slide deck?
We can move to the next slide, please.
Yes, sure. You can go ahead. We're just getting the tech sorted out.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yes, thank you very much. We work to center the UIC's and board's commitments, of course, to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada Calls to Action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples through every aspect of the work that is done at the Urban Indigenous Education Centre and Indigenous education across the Toronto District School Board. The next slide, please. That will be the first canopy, which is focused on professional learning. If it's possible to move to the next slide and the next one. And under professional learning, we wanted to highlight key work that the UIC is doing to focus on Indigenous leadership and leadership in Indigenous education. Next slide, please. And so to highlight the work of leadership in Indigenous education, where the UIC has offered at least 2 series, 3-part series in leadership Indigenous education, as well as begun a project entitled the Dobbin Truth and Reconciliation Project in 2022. We've worked with 30 principals through the 3-part series across the system, and Badabin works with 52 schools across all learning centers, with at least 2 schools from every learning network in the board, with 180 participants, 100 of which are teacher leaders, 52 principals and vice principals, as well as 28 supervisory officers. And that project is ongoing into 2023, culminating in June at the Woodland Cultural Center. So just wanted to highlight that work as it pertains very specifically to supporting Indigenous education in all schools across the system and ensuring conditions are enhanced for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students in all schools. Next slide, please. The second canopy is student well-being and voice. And we wanted to highlight the work of, next slide, please, the UIC Student Success Team. The Student Success Team is a group of brilliant Indigenous leaders that include Indigenous social workers, a child and youth counselor, and a student success teacher who support students through casework, as well as through capacity building for staff who work with Indigenous students across the system. In fact, last year in 2022, student success team worked with over 150 students across 80 schools through a referral process. And we also wanted to highlight the work last year in the 7th annual Creating Spaces of Belonging Conference, an incredible conference happening again this year for the as the 8th annual conference that will happen on May 2nd. And that conference is full. I'd like to continue with the next slide, please. With a focus, the canopy on community engagement. Next slide, please. Focusing on consultation and consent, Executive Superintendent Jim Spropoulos did highlight the work of the Urban Indigenous Community Advisory Committee, which is a key example of consultation and consent with respect to engaging Indigenous community partners with respect to decision-making. And also, as mentioned already, the Elders Council and the guidance provided through decision-making, which connects to, and we'll get to that in the 7th canopy as well, around governance and decision-making, and the honor that I feel personally and as part of the UIC to work alongside and be guided by folks that you see there, Elder Pauline Shirt, Elder Joanne Dallaire, Elder Dr. Duke Redbird, and Clayton Shirt. Next slide, please. I will invite centrally assigned Vice Principal Robert DeRoche to speak on this canopy.
Thank you, centrally assigned Principal Antonino Giambroni. I'm going to start my conversation with Canopy 4, Programming, Curriculum Development, and Implementation. Next slide, please. We support teachers teaching the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Studies courses by developing and implementing to build teacher capacity. We do that by looking at developing curriculum, looking at pedagogy and assessment practices. In our NAC 10 course, which is the expressions of First Nation, Métis, Inuit cultures, 60 teachers are teaching it in over 48 schools with over 3,000 students taking the course. NAC 20, or First Nation, Métis, Inuit in Canada, we started to develop professional learning for this group of teachers with 15 teachers teaching it in 12 schools and approximately 150 students taking the course. And then NBE 3 increased from 27 to 30 schools with over 1,000 students taking it. And thanks to student trustee Isaiah Shafkat passing a motion, the NBE course will eventually be the grade 11 compulsory English course that all students take. Throughout our professional learning is that we ask teachers to engage in responsible learning by documenting their learning through journaling and then sharing that back to us to see what the capacity is in the classroom. Last year also saw the expansion of the primary awesome table with over 100 resources for K-3 learners. Can we go to the next slide, please? So our Canopy 5 is research, development, and innovation. Next slide, please. So the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Chef is a program that started with Kapamachkwe Wandering Spirit School with the chef Joanna Simon. It is expanded to our Native Learning Center downtown and our Native Learning Center East, where we have 3 Indigenous Food Sovereignty chefs who also act as instructors. So supporting cooperative education opportunities for students in the high schools, also working with community members, but also working to support learning in courses that are being offered by those sites. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. Canopy 6, which is partnerships. Next slide, please. The work we do in partnerships works with our community liaison team to maintain and build new relationships for people to be doing direct programming in schools. We started at 25 partners, we're up to 30. Currently, we have 5 partners ready to be signed, and we reached out to over 10 in our meeting with them to continue to build that list to support direct programming in our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Studies courses, as well as our elementary schools. And Nino.
Next slide, please. And next, just wanted to highlight as last canopy, focus on governance and policy, and mention the motion that occurred or that was passed last year in 2022 in consultation with the Elders Council that resolved that commitment to Indigenous self-determination and the impact that's had on policies in the board, specifically the inclusion of an Indigenous education goal in all school improvement planning, a school naming policy, as well as out-of-area admissions policy and its connection to self-determination. So that marks the end of our sharing. Thank you.
Okay, I see one question from, at this moment at least, Trustee Suskandaraja. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff, for the wonderful work on this very important report that we so anxiously wait for throughout the year. I really enjoyed the pictures throughout the report, especially the ones with the learning happening in the circles. I know it's such a sort of small thing perhaps, but it makes a world of a difference. And it just, brought me back to how we learned, and it was always in rows, and just making those small changes, how impactful that was really beautiful to see. Reading is one thing, but seeing the pictures. The other thing I really also enjoyed and would like continuously to happen is the quotes from the students. They were so heartening, especially the quote about the Indigenous students feeling that these programs made them feel like they're not the only Indigenous student in the system. So I really appreciate all the hard work that went into it. I just had a few questions. So through you, Madam Chair, I know for the early years literacy strategy that there's 4 schools that are being targeted. If you could just mention which the schools are or what parts of which part of the city they're located in, I think that would really help me sort of contextualize some things.
Would staff be in a position to respond to that question?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the question, Trustee. So we have referred to ONSE schools, and those schools very specifically in the elementary context are Kapapamachkwe Wandering Spirit, Bowmore School, and Eastview School as elementary schools that we focus on with the highest numbers of First Nation, Métis, Inuit students in an elementary context. And secondary, there are the Native Learning Centers as well as Kapapamachkwe Secondary. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. I thought they were early years. Maybe I misunderstood it. I thought the program was just for early years literacy.
Oh, in reference to that specific early year, sorry, to that specific early years program, I would hand that over to centrally assigned Vice Principal Robert DeRoche in terms of focus.
Okay, so we had 2 different focuses. One would have been last spring when we, at the time, instructional leader Adrian Plumley brought together teachers for a few times. So there's like a collaborative inquiry that happened over 3 sessions. So teachers were joining in over Zoom, and then they would go through resources and pedagogies and practices and then report back, and they're from across the system. And then this fall, the instructional leader team put together a 3-part series where 30 elementary primary teachers came in from schools across the system to do a 3-part learning session that was based in collaborative inquiry about pedagogies and practices that are aligning with Indigenous pedagogies, but also using Indigenous texts as sources.
Thank you. So, I really appreciated the earlier strategy and sort of the work being done on that. I know we've obviously all heard about the provincial funding that's supposed to be directed at the early years. I imagine that Indigenous education was not included as part of that funding commitment. So question perhaps to the board more generally, is there any work that is being done in terms of advocacy on making sure that when these funding announcements come, that there's also sort of special attention being directed at making sure that, you know, investments in Indigenous early year strategies are also being included in this conversation? And this is perhaps a question for Jim.
For you, Madam Chair, let me say that one of the important elements of the work for staff at UIEC is to inform and support every part of our work. So whether that's the early years, whether that's our math strategy, whether that's supporting the well-being of students, whether that's work in caring and safe schools, I can say that staff from the UIEC have become part of the way that we work and that we intend to work. So when we receive news of a new program or an intervention or funding, the important part of the commitment that we've made is that staff from the UIEC are sitting at the table and have an opportunity to weigh in, specifically with request to funding. The funding source that the board has to support Indigenous education comes primarily through funding that is given to the board from courses, from revenue generated through N courses, so courses in what the ministry still calls native language, expressing Indigenous perspectives, et cetera, similar to the NBE3U. Remember that every student who is in one of those courses generates revenue, as well as money that comes to the board from the ministry for the board action plan in Indigenous education. So with respect to funding, we are in a good place where we don't typically have to carve off segments of money that are given to the board for, let's say, implementation in the early years, but rather as the staff informs the board's larger plan, the UIEC has access to funding for specific work in early years related to Indigenous education. I hope that answer helps.
Thank you. And my final question in regards to the MBE3 course, I was happy to sort of see that being discussed in the report as well. So at our current rate of sort of professional development and in terms of staff resources, at what rate do you think that will be ready for every school to have this course in place? So do we have a timeline on that at this point?
So through the chair, before the staff from the UIEC respond, let me just emphasize the important part of the question that was just asked. The most important element in the introduction of NBE3U into this system, as we learned previously from the introduction of NAC, is the work that must happen to prepare teachers to do this work effectively. Because if it's not, there is more harm that could be done than any potential benefit that we may gain. So the plan includes heavy investment and doing this work in a way that is incremental over a period of time to ensure that this isn't some rush jobs where we get people into a room and we give them one session and then people can sit in front of 30 students in a grade 11 English class trying to teach from Indigenous perspectives. So I want all that to highlight the fact that the learning is the most important part of what will happen with this work. And with respect to timetable and more specifics, I'm happy to turn it over again to the staff at the UIC, from the UIC.
Thank you, through the chair. So we're working very closely alongside System Superintendent Tanya Senk and alongside the Elders Council to develop a plan to ensure capacity building and readiness for educators to take this on, I believe, by 2024. And working through a plan that will do exactly what Executive Superintendent Spropoulos mentioned to ensure that folks are ready and set folks up for success, educators up for success, and therefore students up for success within the context of MBE3. And we are in the process of developing that plan to ensure that capacity is built.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Through the chair, just to remind trustees that a report will come back outlining the plan for implementation in June. So the details of the answer provided by staff this evening in response to the trustee's question will be contained in a report that's forthcoming.
Thank you very much, Director. And Trustee Sri Skandaraja, are you finished with your questions, or do you have more?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the timeline, and look forward to the report in June.
Thank you very much, Trustee Sri Skandaraja. Next is Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. And through the chair, it was such a pleasure to receive this report at the Program and School Services Committee. But, you know, one thing that came up in that meeting that I think is very important to reiterate here is the lack of funding to reopen the Boyne River Outdoor Education Center. And I really think, you know, the lack of funding on the part of the province and support is yet another example of their lack of true action when it comes to truth and reconciliation. And I did have a question for staff, just so that it can be publicly noted in this meeting. Can you please tell us why that outdoor education center is closed, what is needed to open it, and approximately the cost of opening it?
It's an excellent and very, very timely question, because we've been discussing that exact issue with much intensity at the highest level of work in TDSB related to Indigenous education at the Elders Council. And they're asking us the same question that Trustee asked. I know that Executive Officer Pichetti has been tireless in her efforts to move this work along, and I just want to ask her please to support the response.
We have a order of magnitude estimate to do retrofits to the main building that could be used to support day activities. So that is in around $3 million. And in part, that is because the building has been in poor condition, and no work has been undertaken there for quite a fair amount of time. We do need to provide new water source, new sanitary connections, replace the roof. It is a very unusual building. It's the ecology building. I don't know whether folks are aware of what this looks like. It's quite a unique building. So we would really like to restore it back to the way it was and make it barrier-free accessible as well. And we've included in that cost estimate a fee to undertake further design studies for the rest of the site. So we've submitted all this information to the ministry, quite a few meetings with them. I'm very optimistic that they are happy with the information we've provided, and that we may hear some good news in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, that's encouraging news. And you know, it is a little ironic that this has been waiting in limbo, in part for the fact that we need clean water and plumbing. You know, let's just sit with that. Another site of Indigenous activity in need of clean water and plumbing. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Arts, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this report. I also want to say thank you to staff for the wonderful work going on at Beaumont as well. So I know Beaumont is our newest site for Indigenous studies with our students, and it's also in my ward, and it's also the school that my children go to. And it is beautiful to walk into school and see the work happening and to hear about the classes and what's going on with students. And but I would say one of the questions that has come up for me, because when you do walk into Beaumont, the honoring Indigenous education is very apparent in the hallways. It's in the front entrance and in the hallways. And so a lot of my other schools, and especially school councils, have asked, how can we engage? And so not so much from a staff or just a staff or a student perspective, but really school councils wanting to better partner with their schools to reflect and honor Indigenous learning as a whole community. And so I'm wondering if staff have advice on how our school councils, our parents and community for schools can help support on and help reach out for their own education perspectives.
Much through the chair, I would ask either Executive Superintendent Spiropoulos or Vice Principal Giambroni to respond, please.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So I think this is an opportunity to highlight actually the work being done by the UIEC to work directly with caregiver councils and caregiver groups and circles that have been organized at Beaumont, for example, with First Nation, Métis, Inuit families to center culture and language in the schools that we work most closely with. And with respect to the question around councils supporting Indigenous education work in schools that has occurred in different contexts across the system, it is something that we are working toward with respect to offering possibilities for learning opportunities with councils, with family councils, and engaging that work together to support Indigenous education goals in schools in partnership with educators, amplifying student voice and family voices, always toward enhancing conditions for First Nation, Métis, Inuit students and families.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Arts. Next up, we have Trustee Earhart, and that's, I think, the last speaker on the list so far.
Thanks very much. And through the chair, I simply wanted to thank staff for this presentation and report. I am the trustee for Toronto Danforth, which is the ward where Kapapamachakwe School is located. I've been privileged to participate in ceremony there. And for Indigenous student trustee Shafkat to have given me a tour, which included meeting the chef, where the work on Indigenous food sovereignty is taking place. It's such important work, and I'm very grateful for the continued work. And I wanted to recognize in particular System Superintendent Tanya Sang and the staff, the Caregiver Council at Kapapamachakwe School for creating such a safe and really incredible learning environment for Indigenous students. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to learn from them as well as the Elders Council, and look forward to continued reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Not seeing any further questions. I think we are using eScribe. Okay, so we're going to open the vote on eScribe. Chernislin is in favor. My apologies. We need a mover and a seconder for this report. Gidavidis and Dawson. Thank you. Okay, and is that carried? Trustee Wong, how do you vote?
Chair, I am in favor.
Okay, thank you. And that has carried. Thank you. Up next, we have item number 16.4.3. This is the Special Education and Inclusion Annual Report 2022-2023. Over to the director to introduce this.
Thank you very much. Associate Director Salmon will speak to this report.
Thank you, and through the chair. This evening in front of you is the Special Educational Annual Report for 22-23. This particular report focuses on 4 key areas. Number 1, our commitment over the last year to inclusion and supporting students within traditional classrooms, but supporting that particular integration for students with special education needs. We also focused around our commitment to anti-oppression and to equity and anti-ableism, and making sure that we were looking at intersectionality within the students that was within each of those classrooms in order to provide support. The special education team also provided extensive professional learning for staff, mandatory learning for superintendents, making sure that we were able to provide opportunities for learning around students with special education needs and being able to move forward the educational opportunities for all. We also engaged around the notion of ensuring that there's parent communication documents to, in many ways, demystify special education. Those were 4 of the key areas that the special education team focused on throughout the course of the year that are ingrained in this particular report. I want to extend my appreciation to the special education staff, System Superintendent Nandy Palmer, Wendy Terrell, who was integral in this particular report, and the entire special education team who have spent countless hours in order to support, provide direction, guidance to our special education, both staff, students, and families in the various communities that we serve. We're open to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have Trustee Rajagulasingham with a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. I want to thank staff for this report. I also want to give a special thank you to System Superintendent Nandy Palmer for also answering questions whenever I have them. As a trustee, I think special education is an area where I'm constantly learning and unlearning biases. And I want to thank my principals and superintendents for always, helping me through that education and learning about kind of the diverse needs of students with physical and intellectual disabilities. I just have 2 questions so I do have a number of questions in the capacity building section and communication and engagement. My first question is around kind of our system. There's a lot of pros of being the largest school board in Canada, but one of the cons is that we're such a vast system that there's a number of processes and procedures that it's kind of easy for parents and guardians to get lost in the system. So my first question is, I've heard a concern from a constituent that they're hearing one thing from administration and another thing from staff. So when it comes to process, how do we ensure that our principals feel supported and up to date when it comes to changing procedures and policies so that they can communicate that information to families and so that they feel supported?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I would ask System Superintendent Nandy Palmer to begin the response.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the first question. Yes, there are several processes and procedures with regards to special education, and particularly in such a large board as the TDSB, communication is key. So our overarching theme of the report, as you will see, is around building coherence and alignment in terms of understanding and also application of special education processes and practices across the district. And one of our key focus areas has been around capacity building through professional learning. And that is where we seek to ensure that communication gets out to principals so that they can support families, parents, guardians, and caregivers with their questions. We also do a monthly PowerPoint deck that has all the relevant information and in a timely manner that is relevant for that month. For example, around May and June, it's around transitions that we send out to all principals and superintendents. And we also go to learning network meetings where we present on a particular topic, again, that's timely and time sensitive. And we also take suggestions from principals and superintendents around areas that they would like more information around. We also have been trying to do a really good job of putting out memos to principals that are topic specific, and that way they don't have to go searching through a number of different information packages for any information that they may require. So I hope that that answers your question number one.
Thank you through the chair. It does. Now just on to communication engagement. I've heard another concern, and I keep saying, I know it's one, but sometimes I like to think that if it's happening once in the community, there's a chance that it may be happening more often and we're just not hearing about it. So my next question is, when an IEP is being updated for a student that's traveling through our system from elementary to high school, how do we ensure that recommendations in the IEP are being consistently communicated to families? Because I am hearing of an instance where something was updated and not communicated to the family. And I think, that's a concern, because when it comes to whether we're talking about, carrying it safe and a suspension and, procedures around that, or in special education, when something changes, we need to be updating caregivers and families. So what happens in the case, what is the expectation in a case when an IEP is being updated and we notice a family hasn't been informed?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, System Superintendent Palmer, please.
Thank you very much. So an integral part of the IEP process is the parent consultation piece, and that is whether you are initiating a new IEP or reviewing an IEP. And there is a document that we do attach to the IEP and put in the OSR, and it's called the Parent Consultation Form. And it's more than just a form. We encourage schools to communicate directly with families. We know that forms get misplaced, or there's, for various reasons, a family member may not be able to complete the form. So we do encourage phone calls or in-person meetings as well, and anything that needs to be done in order to get that parent consultation form completed. Again, we do communicate all of this and the expectations as outlined by the ministry for engaging parents in IEP development or IEP review, and we do communicate that out to superintendents and principals as well. We also at this time, with regards to, I'll just take it a step further in terms of changes being made, and for example, a student that is in elementary school moving to high school, we do have robust transition meetings, and right now one of those communication pieces that we have been reminding principals about is the importance of having transition meetings to review IEPs and review the students' strengths and needs as they transition into high school. So it is a learning piece, and it is a communication piece that we consistently do with principals and superintendents. What I would say is that if trustees are getting concerns raised like this from families, is to please redirect them to the principal and the superintendent of the school, and special education and inclusion staff is more than happy to support with that. We've also shared this information. We have hosted so far 2 parent engagement evenings this year, and we have our 3rd one coming up in May. And we've walked families through, I have a concern about my child, or I've been contacted by a parent, a teacher who has a concern about my child. What happens next? And we've walked them through from the beginning to the end. And we've also outlined this process to them. But please direct any parent back to the school so that we as a department can support the principal to support that family.
Thank you through the chair. Just another question. So I see in the report that there's sessions for parents, guardians, and caregivers. Has there been any opportunity for kind of a drop-in session if a parent had a question to drop in with staff from special education department? I believe we had like drop-in sessions with our mental health and well-being support staff during the pandemic. Just wondering if we have something like that for parents in special education.
So sorry. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, System Superintendent Palmer, you may respond.
Thank you. So not at this time, Trustee, do we have that, but that is the next step that we're looking towards. But what I do want to share is that all of the sessions that we have held so far, we have actually uploaded them to our special education website. So parents who were unable to attend can actually can actually view those sessions online. So they are there for years to come, hopefully, and as we do more. But that is certainly a piece that we're looking into for next year. On another note, we are partnering with PSS, who they're the department that does the mental health sessions, and we are partnering with them for our May session. So we might have something along those lines come out in May. But certainly for Spec Ed specific, we are looking into that for next year. We needed to start with this piece first, see what the asks were, if you will, from the parent community, so we can gear other sessions for them. And that is a piece we're definitely looking into.
Thank you. Thanks so much for going through questions. Just one last one. This is more of a general question that I've kind of always, kind of pondered. When it comes to kind of labels we use, we do a lot of learning at the board. We have such a strong equity team, human rights office that, use such inclusive language. So when it comes to special education classes versus regular, sometimes when I hear the word regular, I interpret it as this is the standard or this is the norm and everything else is kind of othered. And pardon me, but this is my interpretation. Have we ever had any discussions? I know we have, such a large special education department. We have a special education advisory committee. Have we ever had conversations around, is regular the inclusive term to use in this context?
Thank you very much. System Superintendent Palmer.
Thank you. So I do understand fully your concerns around the word regular. We try when we do our communication to always use the ministry terms, and regular as it stands as of today is a ministry term that is used. And so to be consistent with communication so that families and community members, if they're reading something on the ministry site and if they're reading something on a TDSB document, we do need it to be consistent. So we use regular when it comes to matching, if you will, what the ministry is using. Wherever possible, we do try to say instead of regular school. You'll see that more when it comes to regular classroom because that's what the ministry uses, but we tend not to use regular school. We will use homeschool or neighborhood school and words such as that. But when it comes to particular placements, we do use regular to match the ministry use of the word regular.
Thank you so much, System Superintendent Palmer. I'm always learning from you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Rajakulasingam. I'm not seeing any questions from trustees at this point, so we can open the vote on this item, please. Oh, and we need a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Trustee McLean, Trustee Rajakulasingam.
science first.
Yes, yes, you can. In favor. Hastings is in favor. Hayes not here. No, in favor. And that has carried. Next up, we have item number 16.4.4. This is the science, STEM, and robotics update. To Director Russell Rollins to introduce this report, please.
Thank you. I will ask Associate Director Salmon to introduce this report.
Thank you, and through the chair. The STEM and science robotics update really is an update on some of the outstanding work that's happening within our system around STEM, science, and robotics. One of the things that is just absolutely amazing is when you walk into a school and you see some of the microbots that may be in the learning common, and the kids are all huddled around it, and they're programmed it, they're now working it and working together collaboratively in a learning space. It is absolutely inspiring. Or when you actually see one of our star labs that actually, for those who are of my particular generation and remember the whole notion of the planetarium and going down there and actually looking up and seeing the stars, that's what our kids get to experience in a school, in a classroom. And so some of the learning that's taking place in our school is unbelievable in this particular area, and that's what this particular report chronicles. I want to extend my appreciation to the centrally assigned principal, Murvi Salo, for the work that she has done in this area, and she will be online in order to respond to any inquiries. Also, Mafruza Rahman, who's the coordinator for math, science, and STEM. Welcome any questions. Thank you.
Trustee Dawson, please go ahead.
Through the chair. Okay. Thank you, through the chair. I actually requested to pull this report because I think it is so exciting for the public to hear about all of the amazing things that we're doing in STEM and robotics. I had the pleasure of attending some STEM nights at my schools and also the Bloor Collegiate STEAM Olympics, which was very cool. And I guess my comment to staff is just sort of along the lines of what I had said initially about budget, is I think we need to start thinking really critically about how to counter the narrative of the Ministry of Education in the areas of math and STEM and literacy. So I think if there's anything we can do to publicly promote in a way that is clear and succinct through social media, through our own channels as trustees, just planting that seed, that it would be greatly appreciated and hopefully well noted by the public.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Next up, we have Trustee Earhart.
Thanks very much, and thanks so much for this report. I don't know if everyone can see there. I've got my Science Needs Women t-shirt on today. I was delighted to see that this report was coming to board. When I was in high school, in a public high school, I did not know what an engineer was. And engineering is what I ultimately went on to study in university. And it was because of a science teacher that I even learned what that entire field was. And so it's so immensely important, the work that we do in this and other areas, to help students imagine what is possible for themselves and their lives and what we can unlock. It could be just incredible. And so thank you so much. To that end, I am wondering if staff could speak a bit to how to engage diverse segments of the population, women, girls, but also other constituencies that may not typically be engaged in science, STEM, and robotics. And if you could just share some information on how we are engaging these learners. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, centrally assigned principal Murvi Salo will respond to the question.
Thank you through the chair. That's an excellent question, and that is what we are really focusing on in a number of our projects. So if you look at the report, one of the items that is highlighted as one of our projects in that report is Bringing STEM to Life. And Bringing STEM to Life is a project where we've partnered with Lasson's K-I Kindergarten to Industry Academy at York University, and we're working with them on mentoring schools in underserved areas, including, and that mentorship includes equipment loans, and it helps improve the teachers' some STEM skills, but also engaging students and perhaps seeing themselves as in an area that maybe they hadn't considered before in terms of STEM or working with the microbits. And as an extension to that project, we have a work integrated summer school experience with Lassonde, and it offers a physics credit at the same time while the students are also working as a lab assistant on research. And we really are targeting certain groups in terms of those applications. For example, students who identify as female, students who are from demographics that are underrepresented, typically in STEM and engineering. And we have some really good results with that in terms of a 99% completion rate of the program with an 86% course average. And these are not students who are coming from programs with a STEM focus, but rather students who might have had a little bit of an interest in science, and this really sparks that in them. And a lot of our other projects as well, even our robotics subsidies, are often looking at sort of priority and target schools in terms of making sure that we're building that equity within our projects. And Coordinator Rahman, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? All right. And perhaps she's not online anymore. Coordinator Rahman?
Thank you very much, Murphy. I think that perhaps Coordinator Rahman is either having technical issues or no longer with us. So thank you very much for responding to the question.
Trustee Earhart, have all your questions been answered?
Yes, thanks very much. And thanks for the wonderful work you do.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's it in terms of questions from trustees on this report. So could I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee or Vice Chair and Trustees Sriskandarajah. And we'll just open the vote on this. And that has carried. Moving on to item number 16.5. This is the Planning and Priorities Committee report number 5 from April 19th. Item number 1, which is the Human Rights Annual Report from 2021-2022. I'd ask that the director introduce who will be speaking to this report, please.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I would ask System Lead Mahejabeen Ibrahim to introduce the annual Human Rights Report. And I would like to recognize Mahejabeen, who joined us not yet a year ago and is now leading our human rights work. And this report reflects her leadership. Thank you, Mahejabeen.
Good evening, trustees. I bring to you the Human Rights Annual Report for the reporting period September 1, 2021 to August 31st, 2022. As you know, at the Toronto District School Board, we value the human rights of each and every person, and that means we work to create safe, respectful, accessible, and inclusive learning and working environments in which students, staff, and communities can thrive. This work reflects the endeavor of the office during this reporting period, and it continues to be important. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
To start us off, we have Trustee King. Please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. Really want to thank staff for this report. The collection and the analysis of these complaints of bias and hate by students and staff are so essentially important for us. At committee, many questions were asked by trustees. I personally had many questions, like the number of incidents to accompany the percentages for a clearer understanding of the experiences of racism, hate, and bias. So for example, we saw that 56% of the incidents reported in the portal relate to anti-Black racism, and saw that 25% that were reported relate to the experiences and identities of 2S LGBTQIA+ students. Regardless of what those raw figures look like, it's very clear that the lived experience of hate and discrimination at school, in the classroom, and on the yard is too many for Black students, for 2S LGBTQIA students, and for other othered students. And these experiences of racism bias are not somehow separate from the learning experience, but they can and they do shift the learning conditions, and they contribute to that dangerous slope of disengagement. And this is why the work of human rights, anti-racism, and anti-oppression, and creating cultures of belonging are necessarily embedded in so much of the work that we do at TDSB, whether that is engaging science strategies like bringing STEM to life that we just heard about, whether that's special education, expanding artist partnerships, or any of the motions that are being considered in the upcoming weeks. Over the last month, I attended the Know Your Worth conference hosted at the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement, and I attended the International Day of Pink event that was live cast to secondary schools across the system. At the Know Your Worth conference, we heard grade 11 and 12 keynote speakers comment on the transformative experiences of curriculum designed with me in mind. Those were their words. And at the International Day of Pink, I saw the joy, the belonging, the acceptance that was embodied by a whole school community. And that work is necessary and must continue. But what I want to highlight is that examining and addressing how human rights, hate, racism, bias present throughout our system is important, such as the handling of legal and preferred names and identities in our forms, or the harm that's caused when students choose to identify, trusting that they're going to be part of an equitable admission process. So I really want to encourage folks to receive these figures in this report, not in a silo, but to really understand how they relate and how they underscore so much of the work that we need to do. And I want to end by saying that we've recently heard this phrasing of getting back to basics. We've heard that from the provincial government, we've heard that in the press. From my perspective, the right to be valued and respected is basic. So getting back to basics for many requires that the discrimination that's evident in our schools be disrupted, so every student and educator can in fact focus on learning, whether that's math and literacy fundamentals or the global competencies that prepare us for leadership, entrepreneurship, or whatever it is that our students choose. So I really look forward to the continued important work that I know that staff and colleagues are doing in this regard, and thank you again.
Thank you, Trustee King. Seeing no further questions, I think we can open the report, or open the vote. And I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Williams and Trustee Rajwani. Mover and a seconder. And if trustees aren't using eScribe, if you could let us know how you vote.
Trustee Kamaraja in favor.
It's not opening for me, so Dawson in favor.
Trustee Earhart in favor.
Trustee Hastings in favor. No. She voted? Are we done? Okay, and that has carried. Up next, we have 16.53. This is the Canadian School Boards Association Congress 2023 and the National Trustee Gathering on Indigenous Education expense approval. This was referred without recommendation from PPC last week. So who will be speaking to this item? Is it you? Just give us one moment. I believe it's Ms. Joseph Dowers who's going to be speaking to that.
Yes, in accordance with the expense procedure, the trustees Laskin, Arts, Chidislin, Dawson, Rajwani, Williams, and Hastings have applied to attend the Canadian School Boards Association 2023 Congress in Banff, Alberta. And this report is before you for approval of the expense.
Do you trustees have any questions about this? Okay, not seeing any. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Thank you, Trustee Gose and Trustee DeVitis. And we can open the vote on this item. Chernislin in favor. Yeah. Trustee Earhart, how do you vote?
Oh, in favor, apologies.
Thank you. Trustee Hastings, how do you vote? In favor. And that has carried. Okay, item number 16.54. This is addressing Islamophobia. This was a motion from last week, so I would ask that the mover and seconder have a chance to speak to start off with. So Trustee Hassan, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening through the chair. I'm honored once again to bring forward this motion that asks for the TDSB to commit to developing and implementing a system-wide comprehensive strategy to address Islamophobia. Once again, a heartfelt thank you to community members and organizations who have expressed their deep support for this motion through emails, phone calls, text messages, and through delegations at our last Planning and Priorities Committee meeting. I'm honored to have brought this motion forward on your behalf, on our behalf, on behalf of the Muslim community of Toronto. I also once again want to thank the staff at TDSB. Our staff here at TDSB are to be congratulated for their excellent work that they've done over many years to make TDSB leaders in the work of equity and human rights. And I'm sure all trustees here are grateful for that. As we address Islamophobia, it's imperative that we do so knowing the value of having its own place and space, and that we must name it and address it in a discrete and separate strategy that can elevate accountability on the current broader strategy that we have in place. In addition, the Muslim communities of Toronto continue to ask for accountability and more measures of commitment. And that's why Trustee Shan and I have brought this new strategy forward. As I've mentioned, I am a trustee who identifies as Muslim. Everywhere I go, I continuously have heard the need for this separate strategy. I'm representing those Muslim voices, voices from people who have been absent from this table, and the best people to speak about their oppression are people who hold those identities and lived experiences. As we witnessed last week in our Planning and Priorities Committee meeting with our delegations, the Muslim community spoke loud and clear. They told us that this strategy will bring focus to this concern about Islamophobia. It will increase accountability and respond to what I'm being asked for at the community level in New York, Southwestern, and Toronto at large. This new strategy will set an example of the importance of targeted universalism. As we recognize, everyone benefits from the TDSB's targeted removal of systemic barriers faced by the most disadvantaged communities. Reducing these barriers and disparities leads to a better education system for all TDSB students. So I am hopeful that this strategy will address issues of serious concern with accountability built into it. A plan that includes a deeper data collection and community engagement. A plan which recognizes that our communities are incredibly diverse. A plan which addresses Islamophobia in creative ways that include student voice. A plan which addresses the fact that students who identify as Muslim have increasingly and disturbingly been victims of community violence. A plan which will make a community feel as though we see them and value them in the face of discrimination that they face every day. A plan which highlights and learns from the brilliance that Muslim students and Muslim staff contribute to TDSB and the broader community every day. The specific focus which will come from this motion will facilitate this work in a clear and focused way. Again, not to do more work, but to work differently. We've worked in certain ways for a long time, and I believe this motion is a call for us to work differently based on community and student voice. So once again, thank you trustees for supporting this motion tonight as demonstration of our commitment to name and address Islamophobia in a manner which our community feels would be the most beneficial. And for those of you who have any doubt, as I mentioned last week, I come from the Somali community. I'm the first Somali trustee. And a few years back, I can't remember the exact year, in this very boardroom, we discussed the issues of Somali community, and there was a task force that was brought together for a specific plan, for a specific need, and the results have been amazing. Somali students went from having the highest dropout rate to now being on par, and I believe even Somali girls exceeding that level. So we've seen progress when we specifically target groups, right? Instead of putting it all into a broader basket. So I hope to see the same come out of this strategy. And that's why tonight I ask for my fellow trustees to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Shen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud to stand with my colleague, Trustee Hassan, to move this motion forward to address Islamophobia. I want to start off by thanking the delegates who came and opened up and shared their experiences, mothers sharing their experiences with what their children face, students coming forward and sharing their experiences, teachers coming forward and sharing their peers' experiences and so on. It was courageous, it was inspiring to watch, but I know it took a lot for them to come forward. They came forward to share their stories so that we can make it better for those who are being impacted. I want to thank CASA, Council of Agencies Serving South Asians, whose representatives are here. The Muslim educators, Muslim teachers, educators of Toronto Association, they were instrumental in getting the stories forward, and National Council of Canadian Muslim, who continue to work with not just the school board nationally in increasing awareness around this issue. I want to also thank our staff, equity staff. You know, I'm very proud to be here at TDSB. We are championing equity issues, and we've been doing this much longer than many other boards. So, you know, it's with this board that I can expect better, and that's why we are doing this work, because we know foundationally we are committed, and that's why the work of Urban Indigenous Education Center, the Center for Excellence for Black Student Achievement, our anti-oppression being a department, Human Rights Office. This is fabulous work what we are doing, but we have to remember and we have to understand the Muslim students make up quite a big chunk of our student population, the experiences. What we are doing is great right now, addressing Islamophobia, but it's not at scale. it's not happening at the level where we are able to support and sustain that anti-Islamophobia work. So that's why this motion is coming forward. Islamophobia is not just experienced in our school. What we heard was many examples of schools, but our students are impacted by what they see in the media, what they see in the news, how they are being portrayed in movies, how they are being portrayed, how they're stopped and interrogated at airports, how their parents are treated at their workplaces. And so all of these systemic issues contribute to it. So not only we will address Islamophobia at school, but we also will be pioneering the work that can support them deal with Islamophobia outside. So it's important to do this work well. And I think, one of the things that we really have to take into consideration is that the work hasn't been done enough. And that's why we were calling for a separate strategy here. Not an independent strategy, a separate strategy that takes into these unique needs and works together with, because the intersectionality, as we saw, our trustee who spoke earlier is Black and Muslim. So, it's not just Islamophobia, anti-Black racism combined together impacts. So I was asked, what would a strategy do? What would a strategy do in a few years? I'm hoping that this strategy would help Muslim Students Association feel at home and be developed, many more emerging. The students will feel comfortable, a sense of belonging, self-esteem will be higher. They will be able to succeed in their schools and have a sense of belonging that can help them connect to their schools. Parents will feel comfortable coming into the schools, coming into school parent council, not just iftar, but in decision-making spaces. How do we make sure that this strategy can help? How do we make sure that the teachers are supported? They're supported, mentored to be superintendents of education, directors of education. We can see this room better reflect the diversity that we have with respect to Muslim communities. How do we see accommodations not become a second thought, but become a natural thing, prayer spaces to understanding what happens in Ramadan? How do we make sure that Islamophobia incidents are counted and accounted for and reported and dealt with in serious ways that we don't see at this time? But most importantly, as I said last time, this is not just about Muslim students. Islamophobia is living in a lot of our houses. So how can this strategy actually disrupt that in those non-Muslim houses and in the spaces so that we have a generation of people growing up and this won't be an issue because they have to break this at some point. So it's not just about supporting the impact of Islamophobia, but preventing Islamophobia from its roots, and that's important. So as an ally, as a non-Muslim, I have done my part to push Peel District School Board and Toronto, and I'll be continuing on. That's why it's important for non-Muslims to not just take up space to speak on these issues, but to be able to take up the burden of shifting this, because it is in many of our homes. And it is in many of the South Asian homes as well. And it is important to be able to speak up. And I got a constituent writing to me on Twitter saying they are against it right now. And they're coming from a place of Islamophobia being root cause of how they've been brought up. So let me finish by saying that we have a lot more work to do. But I think this strategy will take us on the level of, again, TDSB pioneering this work and showing how it's done so that Canada can follow suit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shan. Up next, we have Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise to make it crystal clear that we must all stand against all forms of hate, regardless of whether we are directly affected by it or not. And that's why, as a trustee on the Toronto District School Board, predating my colleagues, Trustee Hassan and Trustee Shan, that we moved a motion in December of 2021 for staff to begin to think about what kind of strategies are needed to combating hate. And then we got the update in March about that these strategies must be individualized. There must be a separate strategy addressing Islamophobia. So I'm in complete support of your motion. And it must be community developed with staff facilitation, because the communities are broad and the community voices are important, because what happens outside of the community happens within our schools, and what happens in our schools is not isolated from what is outside of the community. So I really wanted to make that crystal clear. I have received texts and emails from people that have seen on Facebook groups and on Twitter that I don't support this motion. So I rise very publicly to say I am in full support of this motion. And I am very grateful to my colleagues for acknowledging that it needs to be a unique strategy, but developed because of all the intersectionalities within the overarching way we're dealing with combating hate and racism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Rajwani.
Just some comments. So firstly, I want to thank Trustee Hassan and Trustee Shen for bringing this motion to the table as a Muslim trustee. We've all heard today that through our human rights report, Islamophobia is a human rights issue, and we have work to be done. And I can't think of a better space to do that than in the space of education and learning. And as we build bridges, not just within the people around this table, but across the education system. I also want to acknowledge the trustees that were leading from behind on this motion, the collaborative nature that people were looking at this from a level of transparency, as well as I want to thank the staff for all the work that you've already started to do. This is not easy work. But I see the actions not just through the strategy development that we've already heard today, but also at the schools. So I want to thank everyone from the lunchroom supervisors to the principals that have been opening up their spaces, that have been changing schedules in schools to accommodate prayer times, to be celebrating iftars and Eids. Those moments can't be forgotten. I know those are just baby steps, but they're steps that we need to celebrate. I also want us to consider, and this is for the staff, as we're looking at Islam, the richness of the faith is the pluralism of practice, diversity, culture, and language. And so as we're consulting community, I ask you to look at it from that lens, so that we're really creating inclusive spaces for those communities, and that we're intentionally looking at moments for education, because this is about combating hate, but it's about education and building those bridges. So how are we engaging all students and all staff and community in this process? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Rajwani. And to close out, we will have Trustee Hassan. Please go ahead.
Yes, through the chair.
And just a reminder, it's 3 minutes when you speak a second time. As the mover, because you're the mover, you're allowed to speak twice because we're at board. So people only are allowed to speak once at board. But as the mover, you get to speak twice, but on the second time around, it's 3 minutes.
No, that's fine. I just want to ask that this be a recorded vote, please. That's it. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, come on. Well, everybody knows the rules now. So the movers are Hassan and Shen. Can we please open the vote? Thank you. And it's a recorded vote.
In favor.
Chernis Lynn in favor. Oh, just give us a moment, trustees. Apparently it's not quite open. Oh, it is now open. Chernis Lynn is in favor. Ghost is in favor. Trustee Hastings, how do you vote? In favor.
Be in favor.
And that has carried unanimously. Item number 16.6 is next. That's the Planning and Priorities Committee Special Meeting Report number 6 from April 24th. And this has 2 items in it. To the director, I just would ask who will be speaking to this report.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, the multi-year strategic, the renewal of the multi-year strategic plan report will be presented by System Superintendent Elizabeth Addo. Before Superintendent Addo speaks, I would like to contextualize this report by saying this week you heard that Bill 98 includes the possibility of the Ministry of Education providing direction to boards with regards to priorities. We will continue to watch the evolution of the bill and the priorities set out by the Ministry of Education as we go through our renewal process. Over to you, System Superintendent Addo.
Thank you. Through the chair, TDSB has begun the process of renewing the multi-year strategic plan to better reflect the needs of students, parents, caregivers, staff, and to respond to the changing trends in education. The multi-year strategic plan is required by the Education Act, and it is an important tool to guide what will happen in our various departments and in thousands of classrooms throughout the system. The report before you has been submitted for your approval and provides guiding principles and other information that sets the direction for the engagement process that continues into the fall. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm not seeing any questions. Are we voting on this? Yeah. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions on this item. So can we move on to the next item in this report and then we'll vote on it all at once? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The annual Caring and Safe Schools report will be spoken to briefly, and we welcome any questions after that. Executive Superintendent Sparopoulos.
Thank you again, Director Russell Rollins, and good evening again, everyone through the chair. The annual Caring and Safe Schools report for the school year 2020-2021 is before you this evening. The report is built on our commitments to truth and reconciliation, equity, human rights, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. And we were able to give a thorough overview of the annual report on Monday at committee. And we were also able to respond to many excellent questions from trustees, which will help to frame our work moving forward. And as I thank the team and research services for the great work in putting this report together, and also our team of well over 100 in Caring and Safe Schools for the work they do every day, Madam Chair, I turn it over to you if there are any more questions from trustees. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on this report or on this item on the report. So we can open. Oh, I need a mover and a seconder for the entire report. Trustee McLean, Trustee Rajwani, and we're going to vote by hand on this one. So all those in favor?
In favor.
Trustee Earhart in favor.
Thank you, trustees. And any opposed? Seeing none, this is carried. Next item is adjournment. Can I have a mover and a seconder, Patel and Rajwani? All those in favor by show of hands? Thank you very much. I know this has ended, but I would just draw people's attention. We didn't discuss in detail, but there are a number of motions that passed tonight that were on items that got lumped together. So there is a lot of advocacy that happened tonight, and I thank trustees for that.